Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my book garden. Um, this is Copper Coins Book 2, Part 3, as I've almost made the number 4 for some reason. I'm very excited to do this. I had a busy but really fun weekend, so I'm coming back supercharged, hopefully. I'm a little tired, but I am happy and healthy, and considering everything that's going on right now in the world, I'll take it. But yes, this is a chill stream. What that means is I will be talking to myself, I'll be talking to my lovely book garden over in the comments, and I will occasionally look things up or have little side tangents. Um Sometimes I like to look up a picture of something just so we all have a better visual or clarify a point. This is also a mature stream. Hello, Truffle. How you doing today? What that means is there will be mature themes. That could mean triggering things, which if you're watching this live, there's only so much I can do. If I see kind of where something's going or have read something before, I have a little more heads up, but sometimes it just happens. If you're watching this later, the title, the description, and the timestamps will let you know if there's something that I view as triggering. Um, because it will be in the title, a short description in the description, and there will be a timestamp for when it starts and ends. So, be good to yourself, be good to your mental health, and if things seem to be getting a little dicey in ways that will affect you, it is more than okay to like just come back to it later after it's been recorded, after I've put those timestamps in. Like, I just want everyone to have a nice time here. We are here just to have a good time, to enjoy the Don May, and just to hang out. So, like, don't stress about it. But yes, hello, Annika. Hello, Ember. Welcome. How's everybody doing? But yes, I am not sponsored. I don't make anything from this. I do this because I can, because I have the time to do it, because I love Don May and want this out there. Um, if I ever am sponsored by anything, which I don't think is going to happen or happen anytime in the future, you guys will be the first to know. I am also not fluent, but I do my best. You might notice my not fluency on names and places, but overall, I think I do a decent enough job. However, if I viciously mangle something, feel free to let me know in the comments and I will try to fix it. But yes. All right. So you are doing good with Eagle Drama is consuming your days right now. Truffle, what kind of Eagle drama is happening? I'm intrigued. Oh no, Ember. Well, I hope you feel better, and that it ends quickly and you feel healthy and happy and back to 100% sometime sooner rather than later. But yes. Ooh, vegetarian fish sauce, huh? There, I imagine that tasted great, but I have fish sauce trauma because there was a summer where after my aunt had moved in with us for a bit, she had brought all her stuff with from her apartment, and one of those was the box that had fish sauce in it, and it was expired fish sauce, and we were cleaning out the garage, and that box, of course, was the one that ended up getting dropped. So there was expired fish sauce everywhere in the lovely hot summer sun. And oh my goodness, the smell was horrendous. It was awful. I think I went through like an entire box of like baking soda just to contain it, and then like gave it like half an hour just to figure out that Oh, it was so bad. So I'm like, power to you with the vegetarian fish sauce. I have not like actively touched fish sauce since then. I was like, no. Oh, thankfully none of it got on me. Cause like that would be a nope, I'm done for the day. I gotta go scrub down. But yeah. No, I'm glad your recipe went well. What'd you use it in? Like what'd you make with it? I'm curious. Yeah, I had a nice weekend. I did some karaoke. I played some board games with some friends. So it was a busy weekend, but a good one. But yes. I have while we wait for that answer. I did end up getting another something that I ordered, and shocker, it's Wang Shin. I think you all will be more surprised if it's ever not Wang Shin. Favorite band in concert tomorrow and beyond excited. What band? I'm curious. Look at these cute little guys. I don't know what's up with the birds, but like they're super cute. They have these little feathers in their hair. And of course, I love their little merp faces. There, let me focus them better. They're so cute. I'm about to drop Wooksy in. Here, I guess I could just like hold him up. Ta-da! That's better. But yeah, they're mini dolls. But yeah. Hi Ruby. Welcome. I do have some unfortunate package news. Don't you love it when you order something and they're like, "I delivered it." It's like, "No, you didn't." I ordered these Longshin popsicles. I have my little ice cream Longshins back on the shelf. But I ordered these popsicle versions and they supposedly got delivered. Yeah, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. So there's part of me that's like, well, do I try again or do I just eat the cost? And I think at this point, I might just eat the cost. But I was like, oh, they're different. I like it. So we'll see. If they show up, you'll just see me excited like that. And it's like, yay! Oh, no, they're little plush little plushies that are shaped like ice pops. But yes, food deliveries are also worrying and expensive. My sister's done meal kits and she seems to like them. They do come with ice or like ice packs, so like that's a little less worrying in regards to like ordering food boxes and meal prep stuff. But yeah. No. So like pluses minuses this weekend, but overall it was a good weekend. So I guess we'll just get started. I don't really have anything else to add. Let's see. Timings. Almost exactly 9 minutes. Nice. Okay. So, last time we had the whole trip up the mountain, which we found out that the people we were traveling with were actually already dead, and had kind of some escapades to remove them from the path and kind of read them last rites and settle them at the bottom of the valley before they could see their bodies. Jarred green curry, just the sauce, and it's amazing. I was actually thinking about trying to make either chicken or tofu curry tomorrow. So it must just be a curry week. That's pretty good. So they took care of that. They arrived at a small town. The ghost troop continued on. And we arrived at an inn, and there seems to be a lot of people and a lot of suspicion about Xuan Min and him being a monk, and the wanted posters, not warning, the wanted posters, and we ended where Xuxian and Xuanmin are asking each other questions back and forth, and we had Xuxian ask Xuanmin, "You said you woke up like this a few months ago. What does that mean?" This time, Xuanmin didn't remain silent for long. He answered quite directly. Exactly what it sounds like. When I woke up, I was alone in a corpse shop in the mountains of Langshuo. A corpse shop? Xuxian was startled. How did you even end up there? Corpse shops were places in Jiangxi region where corpse drivers could rest and take shelter from the weather during their journeys. Living people avoided such places due to the bad luck associated with them. Xuanmin shook his head. I have no memory of anything before that. When I woke up, all I had was a string of copper coins, a handwritten book on geomancy and arrays, a thin piece of paper with some scattered notes, and some yellow talismans. You don't remember what you did before, where you came from, where you were going, or what you were supposed to do? Xuxian felt a pang of pity for the bald donkey. Any ordinary person waking up in a remote corpse shop, knowing nothing about their past or future, would likely go mad. And no, I'm not counting that donkey, just because this is a recap. No, I knew nothing at the time. I recalled some fragments later, but I'd often forget about them again by the next day. What did you do after that? Whenever I remembered something, I'd jot it down on that piece of paper and carry it with me. 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 54. We did pass 50. We're at 54, Truffle. Whenever I remembered something, I jot it down on that piece of paper and carry it with me. When my mind wasn't clear, I'd take a look at it. Oh. Was that the paper you had Liu Shiju help you divine in the underground tomb on Grave Island? You didn't recognize your own handwriting. There were already some words written on it. Handwriting can be forged, Xuanmin said calmly. So, you were worried someone might have imitated your handwriting and written misleading things? Mm. What did you write? Xuxian asked, tossing 2 more gold beads into Xuanmin's pile of silver. A mixture of things. Some about the string of copper coins, the names of a few locations, and one more thing. What thing? Find them, Xuanmin said. I'm supposed to find someone. I owe that person something, and until I repay it, I won't feel at peace. His voice was low and steady, carrying a weight that seemed to fill the room. Though his tone was as cold as ever, there was an undeniable heaviness to his words, a sadness that even an outsider could sense. This was the first time Xuxian had sensed such a strong emotion from Xuanmin, and it made the monk seem more human. For some reason, Xuxian felt a tightness in his chest, a discomfort that he couldn't quite place. He regarded Xuanmin for a minute. Okay, I don't have any more questions. You can keep the money. With that, he gathered the remaining gold beads and stuffed them back into his sleeve, which seemed to have some hidden mechanism. In truth, he still hadn't gotten any real answers. He still didn't know if Xuan Min was the person on the notice, but he no longer felt like asking. He noticed Xuan Min's slight pause, as if the monk also found his sudden coldness puzzling. Just as Xuan Min stood up and began to walk toward the bed, Xu Xian faintly heard voices outside the window, along with the soft clinking of metal, likely the sounds of soldiers' armor. With the curfew in effect, the only people who could be out on the streets at night carrying weapons were the county's officers? I almost forgot. One of the other things that happened this weekend was I broke my phone in that the top half of my phone doesn't work anymore. Like the touch sensor. So I have been getting very creative with my tilting of the screen to get stuff to work because my new phone doesn't come until Thursday. So it has been very interesting figuring that out. But anyway, before we start, our counts. Well, actually, I'll write down the time, then I'll do our counts. Okay. Our counts. Our donkey count sits at 54. Our Jiang Xining suffering is at 5, 10, 15, 18. Our wanted poster count, it might be a little under, but it's sitting at 6 right now. Our face count is sitting at 8, but again, Truffle, I'm gonna have you be the one that kind of calls that out unless it's super obvious. I did my best last time, but we'll see. As always, if there are any spinny wheels of doom, let me know, and I will reset the stream. So far, so good. All right. Chapter 19, on Clouds and Dragons. The two in attendance led the officers from the local government to the base of the inn's wall. With some restraint, they pointed to a closed window on the second floor and whispered, "Sir, it's this room." These two were used to serving people every day, so they had quite the silver tongues. As mere commoners, they didn't fully grasp the deeper implications of the wanted poster, so they had to be extra cautious with their words. They couldn't blurt out something like, "There's a monk in our inn who looks exactly like the state preceptor from the back." Oh, Jaded Desiree Tattoo, that's the person who does my totally sick tattoos. She has a really cool shirt that she started selling. So like this is here, I'll move my chair. This is the back of it. So it's like a design she did. I think that shows it, but yeah. She's super cool. It's also a comfy shirt. So yeah. If they were wrong, they would offend 3 parties at once. I guess they technically mentioned the wanted poster and face, so I'm going to add 1 to both of those. So then that's at 7 and 9, respectively. They might as well gouge out their eyeballs and wash them clean if that happened. But they also couldn't say there's a monk in our inn who looks a lot like the one wanted across the land. And again, 8 and 10. What if, by some remote chance, this monk really was the state preceptor or someone connected to him? Associating a renowned figure with a wanted poster would only invite trouble. After much deliberation, the 2 attendants settled on a neutral statement when they went to the government office. "A monk has arrived at our inn, and he seems rather unusual." How the officers interpreted unusual wasn't their concern. Even so, when leading the officers to the base of the wall, the attendants felt their nerves pulled taut. For reasons they couldn't name, they were unable to calm themselves. Although the voices at the base of the wall were hushed, Shushan, curled up in his bedding, heard every word clearly. They were surrounded again by county officers. The bald donkey must have been cursed with bad luck. 55. Of the 3 towns he had stayed in, he had managed to attract the attention of the authorities in 2, and each time they had come right to his door. Hello, Gabby! I'm gonna lurk and go to the beginning of the stream to catch up. Of course, no worries. I'm glad you just said hey. Not to mention, Shushan's inexplicable overheating from earlier hadn't dissipated. He rolled over, turning the back of his head toward Xuanmin. It was a typical cycle. 3 days of minor irritation led to 5 days of major irritation. Xuanmin's footsteps were always silent, but to Shushan, his presence was anything but subtle. He could sense that Xuanmin had approached the bed and was standing there, looking down at him. Given Xuanmin's stoic and indifferent nature, Shushan assumed he'd come over to do one thing and one thing only: collect the money Shushan had told him to take away. To Shushan's surprise, Xuanmin didn't move. His hands didn't touch the bedding or reach for the money. Instead, he just stayed beside the bed. It's a little weird. What was the point of standing there like a pole without saying a word? Shushan scowled a little. He wasn't used to being stared at by someone motionless and silent like this. If it were anyone else, he would dismiss them as easily as a speck of dust or shove them away with one hand. But Xuanmin was different. When ordinary people stared at Shushan, he only felt annoyed. When Xuanmin studied him like this, the back of his head, neck, and shoulders grew tense. His scales were practically stretched taut. Are you done yet? If you have something to say, you accursed monk, just say it. Oh, we didn't call him a bald donkey. We actually used his title. Look at that. Shushan tensed up in his nest of bedding as he grumbled to himself, but he didn't make a sound. The room was eerily quiet. For a moment, all the noises from next door, outside the window, and even a street away vanished despite Shushan's extraordinary hearing. He was waiting for Xuanmin to speak. After all, standing there for so long without moving must have meant he had something to say, something unusual. There was no reason for ordinary words to be held back for so long. Was he going to explain who he was looking for? Something else? The officers outside the window were preparing to come upstairs, but Xuanmin still hadn't spoken. Shushan's mind raced. How haven't you suffocated yourself yet? The officers' hushed voices faintly reached Shushan's ears. Watch your step. Don't make any noise and alert them. We'll enter through the front door and you guard the window. Let's go. If you keep up your suffocation act, you'll end up in one of the county's prison cells, Shushan sneered in his head. You. Xuanmin's low voice had ground out at last, and it carried an indescribable tone that made the skin on the back of Shushan's head tighten. You're a mighty dragon, but just one word from someone makes you tense? What kind of reaction is that? Shushan held his breath, waiting for Xuanmin to continue. But the blasted bald donkey fell silent again after uttering one word. 56. Arresting a dragon seems like a really bad idea. Yeah, arresting... I just imagine it's maybe like 4 dudes two guarding the window, two coming up the stairs, and I'm like, if there's a person that has a significant bounty, like, even if it's a bigger force, like, don't you think that's a bad idea? Like, I maybe it's because I know Schwanman, like, and how ridiculously overpowered he is, but they don't even know about the dragon yet. It was a good thing that this wise one was a human and not a dragon. Otherwise, the feeling of being left hanging would have driven him to tear the house down. Yeah, they are about to fuck around and find out. Schwanman isn't allowed to kill them, but that doesn't mean much. Ah, reminds me of the chaotic good barbarian. The officers had entered the inn through the back door, but it seemed they had been spotted. Some commotion ensued. Shushian heard the rustle of Schwanman's robes as he turned his head toward the door, and that odd atmosphere from before vanished at the disruption. Inexplicably furious, Shushian buried his head in the nest of bedding like he wished he could suffocate and be done with it. I don't care if you live or die. If they catch you, so be it. I have my ways to escape. But a white light had already begun to emanate from his body. Thud, thud, thud. Here, I guess. Now that they were upstairs, the officers no longer bothered to hide their movements. Their footsteps were hurried and heavy, enough to send anyone's heart pumping. Outside the window, a group of officers drew their sabers with a sharp screech of metal. I don't know. I don't have a screech. Sorry. Screech! Of metal. Both the door and the window were about to be blocked off. The officers who had reached the top of the stairs made even more noise as they approached the door, shouting at the attendants waiting nearby. In that split second, the figure curled up on the bed vanished. A long black shadow emerged from the bedding, rapidly elongating and growing as it rose into the air. Boom! The wall next to the bed collapsed, revealing the stunned faces of Shi Tuzhang and Lu Nianxi in the neighboring room. It seemed Xuanmin hadn't expected Shushan to transform into a dragon without any hesitation, for he was momentarily stunned. By the time he regained his composure, he found himself holding a black robe, clearly thrown at him by the dragon, who was treating him like a mere servant tasked with carrying his clothes. Also, if Shushan doesn't want to stay in jail, he's not going to stay in jail. Just as well, I hate metallic screeches. Some of those old martial arts movies with swords are hard to listen. Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll keep it to my gong noise and my thumping. More absurdly, after tossing the robe to Xuanmin, Shushian also scooped up the gold and silver pieces from the bed with one claw. The treasures rolled around in his claws for a moment before disappearing beneath his scales, hidden who knew where. The officers outside couldn't possibly miss the commotion of a wall being blown apart. An explosive shout rang up. "Don't waste your energy! You're surrounded on all sides! There's no way you can escape!" As they shouted, the officers slammed the door open with a loud bang. "It's futile," their leader sneered. "If you have the ability, why don't you just lift the roof and fly away?" His taunting abruptly cut off. The officers crowding outside the door thought they were dreaming. No, they must have been. The leader's mouth hung open as he stared, dumbfounded, at the enormous black dragon coiled inside the room. The creature was terrifyingly large. Its tail alone filled the entire room. The bed was crushed under its weight, and one whole wall of the room had collapsed. The edges of the break were as clean as if cut by a sharp blade. But what kind of blade could cut through a wall as if it were tofu? The leader watched as the dragon lifted the roof of the room. Its massive body stretched outside and coiled over the sloping eaves, which creaked ominously under its weight. While the officers stood frozen, their faces pale with shock, the dragon lowered its head and swept its half-lidded eyes over them. Then, with a swift motion of its claws, it grabbed a short middle-aged man and a thin boy who had been dumbstruck in the other room. At the same time, it nudged a young monk in white robes onto its back with its head. I feel like this is kind of the... You know what? I'm just going to continue. I love the distinction of one, he grabs the other two, and then for Xuan Min, he's like, yeah, you can get on my back. I got this. The dragon coolly scanned the crowd before it let out a clear, piercing cry. Its body then surged forward. In an instant, the wind and clouds churned. Faint flashes of lightning sparked within the thick mist. The overcast sky flickered with light and shadow as the deep rumble of thunder grew louder and closer. A fierce wind that howled like a wild animal kicked up. Injustices for everyone. Oh, I guess that could be technically considered a Jiang Xining suffering. Good point. So he's at 19. The dragon rode the wind and soared into the sky. Its long black form flickered in and out of view among the clouds, twisting and turning a few times before it disappeared completely. It's like he is saying, I got you, baby, hop in. Right? Everyone, the officers outside the door, those waiting at the base of the wall, the inn attendants, the residents, and shop owners on either side of the street, and anyone who happened to glance up at the sky at that moment, witnessed the dragon's ascent into the clouds. They stood in stunned silence, unable to process what they had just seen. I think what they just had seen is probably something that looks a little bit like this. Do they have the full picture here? Ha! There you go. Right? The leader of the officers didn't even get a clear look at Schwanman's face. He could only remember his snow-white monk's robes. As the dragon, also this won't be the last time Schwanman rides the dragon. Wink. Ooh. As the dragon disappeared with the rush of wind, the gathered clouds shifted and a torrential downpour began. The rain was heavy and cold, striking their faces with an icy sting that sent shivers down their spines. It was only then that the officers slowly began to regain their senses. Did it really just lift the roof off and fly away? One of them muttered. His voice was barely audible, as if squeezed from the depths of his throat. Whether from fear or the cold, it was hard to tell. The leader's lips trembled, and he turned to his men with a pale face. We came to arrest the monk, right? Yeah, one of his dazed subordinates replied. And that thing that flew into the sky, that was a dragon, right? The leader continued, as if in a dream. Yeah? The monk! Did you see him? The leader looked up at the clouds, his expression muddled. The monk rode the dragon and flew away. Yeah. They stood there like a mob of meerkats, their necks craned as they stared dumbly at the sky, unable to say anything beyond, yeah. It was only when their clothes were thoroughly soaked by the cold rain, a moment later, that they snapped back to reality. A monk! Riding a dragon! Dragons were divine creatures, not something you'd see any day. That monk had ridden the divine creature into the sky. How could that monk be an ordinary person? A thought flashed through their minds almost simultaneously. They looked at each other, their faces filled with fear. One of them cautiously whispered, Could could it be could it be him? A monk who could command a dragon. There was only one person in the entire nation they could think of, the mysterious, never seen state preceptor. Sometimes rumors spread through the streets at an astonishing speed. In just one night, the entire town of Huashen County was buzzing with one thing. The state preceptor had appeared. The once inconspicuous inn became the center of attention. After being interrogated by the authorities, the two inn attendants were bombarded with questions from their neighbors. And yes, the officers, we aren't getting paid enough for this. And yes, I also understand, Truffle. The jokes write themselves sometimes. However, while Hawashi County was in an uproar, the monk and the black dragon, who were the subjects of all the gossip, were swimming ashore from a wild lake near Qingping County. Shi Tuzhang and Lu Nanqi had yet to recover from their aerial ordeal. They floated on the lake like corpses. Once they were fished out by Xuan Min, they lay on the shore in a stupor for a long time, unable to utter a word. Jiang Xining had been forced back into paper form. Now he clung to a dry reed by the shore, trembling in the wind. As he shivered, he squinted at the distant pavilion. Wise one, could you please choose a less thrilling way to land next time? Jiang Xining called out. We landed, didn't we? And we saved on travel expenses. Shushian pointed nonchalantly at the distant city gate. Look at that city gate. Do you recognize the characters on it? Come on, read with me. Qing Ping County. I brought you right to your elder sister's doorstep, and you're still complaining? Have you no shame? Huh? Even his escape had to be a huge, flashy show with thunder and rolling clouds, like anything less wouldn't do himself justice. But his lower body remained quite hampered, and his tail difficult to control. All the way here, I had to rely on the raging wind I summoned to either push or carry me. It was the only way to control our direction. Shushian was sopping wet as he leaned against the tree and tapped his leg. You don't need a brain to know that things would be a bit unstable. It should be obvious, shouldn't it? Things, however, had not just been a bit unstable. They had been extremely unstable, downright perilous, even. The whole journey, Shi Tuzhang had been praying hard that Shushian's claws would hold tight. He even wished he had 8 legs like an octopus so he could cling firmly to the dragon's claws. Every time Shushian rolled in the clouds or soared higher, Shi Tuzhang was both exhilarated, like he had ascended to heaven, and scared out of his mind, left screaming like a banshee. The thrill was so intense that he felt like his soul had fled his body. I mean, I don't really blame him. That'd be like reverse skydiving without a harness, like without a harness that you trusted. Like, exhilarating, yes. Terrifying, also yes. And I imagine that he was probably, like, either about to sleep or sleeping before this, so it's like dead sleep to, oh my god, to sky to, oh my god. I don't know why my nose is so stuffy all of a sudden. Weird. Meanwhile, Jiang Xining had felt somewhat relieved during their flight through the sky. He knew it was wise to have turned back into paper and slipped into Lu Nianqi's inner pocket. Paper was light, and the pocket was hidden inside his clothes, so there was no risk of falling. Yeah, that poor stonecutter is having a few bad days. At least he didn't end up as disheveled as Shi Tuzhang and humiliate himself. His relief hadn't lasted long. Shu Xian was going too fast, and when they landed, the wind alone wasn't enough to slow them down. Unable to control his tail or think of a better solution in the moment, he chose a lake near the city that looked deep and wide enough to serve as a landing spot. Ouch! A massive black dragon splashing straight down could easily have emptied half the lake and shattered an entire stretch of the city wall. But Shu Xian had been clever. Realizing he couldn't stop in time, he tossed everyone aside in midair and transformed back into human form. He even remembered to snatch his clothes from Xuanmin in the process. With a series of loud splashes, everyone had plopped into the water, one after another. As soon as Shu Xian hit the water, Xuanmin had grabbed him by the waist and pulled him toward the shore. Though it could be said the two swam ashore together, Shu Xian was only going through the motions with his arms. In reality, Xuanmin carried Shu Xian to dry land. Shi Tuzhang and Lunian Shi had only been slapped hard by the water, but Jiang Xining almost disintegrated. After all, he was made of paper, not metal. Just how many indignities had he suffered up to this point? Well, since he mentioned it, he gets another one. I can tell you, 20. He suffered 20. It's actually kind of funny that we can tell him, you've suffered 20 indignities, if not more. When Xuanmin fished Jiang Xining out and hung him on a withered reed to dry, he felt like he'd survived a natural disaster. He did catch a break briefly. He didn't dare move his limbs, afraid that the slightest movement would cause his arms and legs to fall off. Oh, what were you thinking, wise one? To throw us down from such a height? Jiang Xining asked. He was still shaking with terror. Shu Xian leaned his elbow on a nearby rock. Spur of the moment decision. Jiang Xining felt like vomiting blood. Shu Xian leaned against a tree. He had hastily draped his black clothes over himself, but they were half slipping off his frame, giving him a somewhat rakish and untamed appearance. Xuanmin, unable to stand the feeling of being soaked, drew a talisman on his hand. Instantly, his robes were a dry, pristine white, free from the smallest speck of dust. Treading through the wet grass, he bent down and smeared a streak of blood from his still bleeding finger onto the foreheads of Lu Nianqi and Shi Tuzhang, then touched Jiang Xining's trembling paper form. The faint streaks of blood quickly faded. I feel like I'm being roasted by a fire? Jiang Xining said cautiously. Cleansing spell, Xuanmin said. The reason he only smeared a streak and didn't draw the full talisman was that the moment it took effect, it would generate some heat, and he was afraid they wouldn't be able to withstand it. Jiang Xining was only a thin sheet of paper and dried right away. He relaxed and slumped completely on the dry reed. Shu Xian tugged at his collar. His soaked clothes clung to his skin, heavy and unpleasant. He was about to muster some body heat to dry his clothes when he saw Xuanmin walk over, having finished with the rest. The white hemp of the monk's robes was considered inauspicious by the common folk, but it was indeed beautiful, like a wisp of white mist in the deep night. Its hem brushed over the dry grass and gravel, yet not a speck of dust clung to it. Xuanmin stopped before the dragon and gazed downward. Shu Xian looked back from where he was lounging with an indifferent expression. Waiting for the monk to speak in the inn had nearly driven Shu Xian mad. If he waited again with some undefined expectation, he might as well feed his brain to the fishes. Don't just stand there in front of me, Shu Xian said, keeping his voice neutral. Well, that was very neutral, but Xuanmin was standing while he was sitting down. If he didn't look up, he could only see Xuanmin's hands hanging by his sides. Just as Shu Xian was about to look away, the hand in front of him moved. Xuanmin didn't bend down. Instead, he used the curve of his finger to lift Shushian's slender chin, making him tilt his head back slightly. Then, with his still bleeding finger, he drew a streak on Shushian's forehead. Hot. Shushian was caught off guard and instinctively focused on Xuanmin's finger. He wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but he felt like Xuanmin's blood-stained thumb had paused near his cheek. For a brief moment, he thought Xuanmin's finger was about to touch his face, but the fingertip only hesitated briefly before moving up to draw a line on his forehead. Oh man, we don't get a picture of that scene, but we do get a cool one in 2 pages, so slight compensation. Xuanmin still wore his usual cold expression. His calm eyes were fixed on Shushian's forehead, as if he were doing something utterly ordinary. Shushian couldn't see what the blood streak on his forehead looked like, but he could feel his soaked, sticky clothes drying rapidly. He adjusted the fabric. "Would it kill you to bend down?" he drawled. Xuanmin lowered his hand and met Shushian's eyes. "Not going to turn the back of your head to me anymore?" Shushian felt like smashing the boulder he was leaning on into the bald donkey's face. How many? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 57. Oh. Shushian felt like smashing the boulder he was leaning on into the bald donkey's face. "I'll do as I please. None of your business. Get lost." In all the time Xuanmin could remember, he had rarely shown emotion and never bothered to delve into others' feelings. To him, Shushian's temperament, capable of flipping through moods like a book through pages, going from clingy one moment to dismissive the next, was like someone who'd never walked before trying to run on water. The leap was a bit too much. Shushian shooed Xuanmin away by slapping the rock. The monk stood there for a second before he turned to leave. Shushian felt a surge of frustration. He wanted to spit on this idiot's face. What those fingers do, right? Sorry. Shushian shooed Xuanmin away by Jiang Xining had dried off. He slid down the withered reed and transformed back into human form. Once he turned around, he saw Shushian's dark expression. Why do you look like that?" Jiang Xining asked cautiously. "After all that effort, are you hungry again?" Shushian made a low, gloomy sound in his throat. "My teeth are itching. I feel like eating someone." At that, Jiang Xining peeked at Shi Tuzhang and Lu Nianqi. Xuanmin hadn't gone far. He gathered some dried branches and leaves, placed them between Shi Tuzhang and Lu Nianqi, and lit a fire to warm them. This would prevent the two from freezing while their clothes dried. I thought he just dried their clothes. Anyway. After starting the fire, Xuanmin walked back and stood beside Shushian, who scowled at him. "What now?" What crawled on me? That's creepy. Ew. Xuanmin untied the string of copper coins from his waist and swiped his finger over it. "Hold out your hand." Though skeptical, Shushian did as he was asked. Xuanmin set the string of coins in his open palm. Some magical tools, though through extended use, accumulate spiritual energy. You can borrow this power for yourself. Xuanmin cast his eyes over Shushian's lifeless legs. Shushian had heard of such things, but magical tools were usually used as a medium by ordinary people. He had no use for them and had never given them much thought. The so called copper coins with a glossy surface referred to coins imbued with spiritual energy. These tools, refined with pure spiritual energy, were excellent aids, useful for everything from divination and geomancy to manipulating the five elements of heaven and earth, if one had the ability. Oh, that's fair. I think he couldn't dry them all the way since he can withstand more heat than they can. That makes sense. If they could do anything, then perhaps they could help regenerate bones and tendons. Shu Xian, observing how Xuan Min glanced at his legs, understood his meaning. However, most people who owned these types of tools saw them as extensions of their own lives. They'd make a foe of anyone who dared touch them. To hand one over with a single curse was unthinkable. Shushan studied the copper coins in his hand, unsure of what to say, his expression refusing to settle in one place. Did you drink rat poison or something? Xuanmin didn't have anything to say to something so ridiculous. Either way, Shushian's disbelief persisted. He dangled the copper coins in front of Xuanmin's eyes, waving them once, then twice, giving the monk a chance to change his mind. On the third try, Xuanmin suppressed a sigh, then pressed Shushian's hand down. There are seals on these coins, but they can still be of some use. I don't need them for now, so you can take them. Seals? Shushian was startled before he understood. No wonder the coins looked dull and devoid of spiritual energy. But who has sealed them? You? Xuanmin shook his head. I don't remember. There are 5 coins, each with a seal. 2 of the seals have loosened as of late and might be broken soon. Shushian bit his tongue and considered this. When he had been a paper doll or gold marble, he could rely on his small size to press against Xuanmin's wrist to recover his strength. Since returning to his original form, whether as a dragon or a human, it was no longer convenient to lean against Xuanmin. Just conjuring that image was enough to make Shushian's eyes burn. Never mind actually doing it. The recovery of his spine had stagnated significantly in recent days. He could feel some improvements, but they were much slower than before. He didn't want to drag around his useless legs or be carried by others. It was far too humiliating. Shushan lingered in thought until his hesitation evaporated. He would keep the coins. Placing them in his palm, he closed his eyes and focused on healing his spine. The cleansing spell, drawn with blood, wasn't as effective as a whole talisman. It took some time for Shi Tuzhang and Lu Nianqi's clothes to dry completely, and it took even longer for them to recover from their shock and confusion. The heck? Okay, that's rat poison. I was a little confused by what he was saying Xuanmin was eating. It's rat poison. Love the picture, though. It's so pretty. The bottom part's really funny. And yes, Xuanmin is so caring in his nonchalant way. He's very blunt. He's very blunt caring. It's really funny. I do love that our dragon is one of those protagonists that actually has, like, curly hair. Got them big hot curls. And he does look like Pac-Man. Yes, Jimothy! For those of you who don't know who Jimothy is, let me see if I can bring up a picture of Jimothy real quick. So it's a raccoon that has a deformed spine. So he kinda looks like a cryptid. Um, but he's super cute and sweet. I have a lot of Jimothy on my feet, so let me see if I can tilt this and get it. Oh, come on. Let me see. Let me see. I know I have some Jimothy stuff. I Come on, phone, work with me. It's not working with me. Alright, it's not loading, but look up Jimothy when you can. Jimothy the raccoon. Can I do it? He's so cute. Let me see if I can. Maybe there's a Jimothy on YouTube. I can use YouTube. Hang on. Jimothy. This is Jimothy. He's so sweet. They also have some videos of when Jimothy was a baby. He still can climb just fine. Like, his mom and the litter took care of him really nicely. So, like, he just kinda has, like, that special cryptid air about him. Look at him. But he's a sweetie. They have some pretty cute. Oh, here he is. Here he is. The There's the mom and the kiddos. She would help carry him. But yeah, he looked like a Jimothy. No. So I just I recently discovered Jimothy and I love him. Sorry about the tangent. And then here's more truth that my phone's broken. Gotta love the random cracks my screen. Why aren't you in a hurry at all? Lu Nianqi asked Jiang Xining after recovering. He didn't like the idea of holding the group back. Jiang Xining sat down by the rock, quietly watching the city gate illuminated by lanterns in the distance. We have to wait until dawn's light anyway. What's the rush? We're already at the gate. The city gates were closed at night, and there was a curfew. No one could enter or leave without good reason. Even if they entered the city, it wouldn't be appropriate to knock on someone's door in the middle of the night. The night was already half over, so dawn wasn't far away. They could wait. No, I'm right there with you, Truffle. It's been cracked for a while, but finally it got that final drop where it just was like, I'm done. I'm tapping out. I'm good luck. The last time I saw my elder sister was 3 years ago when she returned to Ningyang after receiving the news, Jiang Xining murmured. After my death, my memories have become hazy, and it wasn't until I received this paper body that they improved. But I remember she cried for a long time. She sobbed so much that I can still hear it now. When the gong rang at dawn and the city gates opened, the people inside would start their morning routines, and he would finally see his elder sister. He could see how she was doing and release his parents' souls that had been sealed for so long. So, in case you've forgotten, that's the reason they started this, or one of the reasons they started this quest to Unping City. In his years of living, In all his years of living, he'd rarely left home and had never experienced the nervousness of homecoming. Now, between this unfamiliar wild lake and the city gates of a town that was foreign to him, the thought that all his lingering attachments would soon be resolved, his final burden lifted, filled him with a sense of unease. Clang! After what felt like an eternity, the gong heralding the arrival of dawn rang out from within the city. Okay. 1 hour. I'm going to say 1 minute. Oh, my air filter's off. That might be part of the reason I'm so sniffly. Gotta love dust allergies. All right, chapter 20, Plague County. Actually, 1 second. All tidied up, the group stood at the city gate. With a creak, the ancient gate was pulled open from the inside by the guards, revealing the city within, accompanied by a gust of wind carrying a strange odor. Shi Tuzhang choked on the cold wind and coughed several times. Frowning, he covered his nose with one hand and fanned the air in front of him with the other. What is this smell? Smells like medicine mixed with something else, like something musty. That's fresh medical brew mixed with some moldy herbal dregs, Jiang Xining explained. He didn't cover his nose, as these two smells were not unfamiliar to him. His family's clinic had several small stones in the back room where such medicines brewed from dawn to dusk. Filling the air with the scent of fresh medicine year-round. During the rainy season in April, the dregs dumped at the back door in the morning would emit a faint thunk by evening. But the Jiang family clinic had nothing on the size of Qingping County. There had to be at least a dozen households nearby brewing medicine and dumping the dregs for the smell to waft out as soon as the city gate opened. That many people falling ill at the same time. They all had a bad feeling about it. Jiang Xining's expression shifted, and he pressed forward a few steps into the city. However, several city guards swiftly moved across their long sabers and blocked the path. The city gates are closed for the time being. Please turn back, one guard said stiffly. May I ask why that's the case? Jiang Xining asked, his voice tinged with urgency. The guard remained cold and official. No comment. Please turn back. However, the guard couldn't help but dart his eyes toward Xuan Min. Oh. I'm gonna say that's gonna be a future face count, so we're gonna put that at 11. We have entered a plague arc. Another guard, this one square-faced, frowned and pointed his saber at the figure Xuan Min was carrying. Why do you have a dead person? You trying to bring bad luck? He reached out to push one man, wanting to shoo the group away from the gate and out of the way. Snap! Just as the square-faced guard was about to touch Xuan Min, Shu Xian lifted the black cloth covering his face and grabbed the guard's wrist with his pale hand. Rude, at least tell them why. Right? Just, turning his head, Shu Xian said in a low voice, "Speak properly. Why resort to violence?" Huh? The guard was startled and tried to pull his hand back, but it didn't budge. He hadn't expected someone wrapped head to toe in black clothing to be alive. Caught off guard, he blushed and raised his voice. How dare you! What are you trying to pull, pretending to be a ghost? He glanced at Shu Xian's thin, pale, feeble-looking fingers and tried to pull away again. But those fingers were like iron clamps that showed no sign of loosening. The square-faced guard glared at Shu Xian. Let go! Sure, Shu Xian drawled. First, tell me why the city gates are closed. Is there any room for negotiation? Those words were polite. The force in his grip made it clear that this was a threat. At this, the other guards stepped forward, ready to surround them. Xuan Min, still holding Shu Xian, closed his eyes, murmured something, then tapped the ground with his right foot. The guards felt the ground beneath them tremble unexpectedly. An earthquake! They shouted in horror. In a flash, they were jolted back to their original positions. The recent earthquake in Anqing Prefecture had clearly left them off kilter. After being shaken like this, the guards froze, exchanging worried glances and holding their breath as if waiting for another tremor. Let go! The square-faced guard, still caught in Shu Xian's grasp, was also uneasy. He hunched his body and tried to pull his wrist back again. It's not that we don't want to tell you. As you can see, Qingping has been experiencing frequent earthquakes recently. Buildings are unstable and there's an outbreak of disease. We're telling you to turn back for your own good, not to harm you. Disease? Shu Xian seized on the main point. Qingping County is suffering an outbreak. Seeing that he couldn't get rid of them, the square-faced guard shook his head. A few days ago, there was an earthquake. The ground cracked in several places, and some unknown black insects crawled out from underground. Some people in the county were bitten by those insects and developed rashes. The rashes are unbearably itchy and painful. If scratched, they break open and start to fester within 2 days. It's horrifying. I mean, yeah. Jiang Xining couldn't help asking, what about the doctors? Didn't they prescribe medicine in time? Well, no one knew what was going on at first. Some people couldn't bear it and went to see doctors, while others thought it was a minor ailment and treated it like one. And it turned out that this disease is contagious. Guard lowered his voice, his tone wavering with terror. It spreads terribly fast. Can't you smell the dregs of medicine all over the city? Enough! Why waste words on them? The other guards, seeing that the ground had stopped shaking, straightened up and tried to chase them off again. If they keep getting in my way like this, I'm not going to hold back. I'm capable of anything, Shu Xian thought. He had always been somewhat reckless. While these guards weren't unreasonable, Shu Xian and the others really needed to find a way into the city. If they kept blocking the way, he might just turn back into a dragon and fly over the city walls. The guards were moments away from using force on the group when one of them, a dark-skinned man standing further back, uttered a sound of surprise. Brother Li, your neck! What's wrong? His tone, the square-faced guard instinctively reached to touch his neck. That morning, he'd felt something strange there, but thought it was just his clothes rubbing against his skin. In his rush to get to his post, he hadn't bothered to investigate. You've got a rash! Another guard leaned closer under the lantern's light and took a closer look, then immediately stepped back. 2 thumb-sized patches! The others, who had been leaning over to take a look, scattered like a receding tide. Oh, so this is the rash you were talking about. You got one on your hand, too, Shushian said calmly, squeezing the guard's wrist bone and pointing to the webbing between his thumb and index finger. See, there's a small patch here as well. The square-faced guard stood there in shock. Shushian glanced at the rash and suddenly had an idea, and his ideas were always unconventional. He hissed and looked at his hand that was gripping the guard's wrist. It really spreads fast. I've got it too. Hearing this, the guard looked down in shock and saw that Shushan's hand was rapidly developing a large red rash. It spread from his fingertips to the back of his hand. In no time, his entire hand was red and swollen. It cut a stark contrast with the pale skin of his wrist, making the sight even more alarming. The surrounding guards were left dumbfounded at this sight. The square-faced guard nearly forgot to breathe. He stared in horror as Shushan murmured, "What did you say happened after the rash appears?" It becomes unbearably itchy and painful, breaks open and festers," one of the guards replied. "Oh, right." All the guards watched in stunned silence as Shushan's hand began to rot, the flesh peeling off until a chunk of it fell on the ground with a soft plop. "How bad does the rot get?" Shushan asked. All the guards were too shocked to speak. When no one answered, Shushan bit his tongue and decided to take it up a notch. The square-faced guard let out a cry at the sight of Shushan's decaying hand, the flesh curling away from the bone, and tried to yank his hand back. But the moment he moved, with a soft thud, Shushan's entire hand rotted through at the wrist and fell to the ground. See, I've been infected too. In this short time, my hand came off. I'm also half paralyzed and can't walk. With me slowing them down, I'll probably have rotted away completely by the time we make it to another county to get a doctor prescription. Shushan is so dramatic, the ultimate theater kid. Right? It's like, how fast? How fast did you say it goes? What symptoms? Let me just, oh yeah, polka dot, polka dot, polka dot. Shush, with me slowing them down, I'll probably have rotted away completely by the time we make it to another county to get a doctor's prescription, Shushan said, pointing his exposed bone at Chuan Min, almost poking him in the face. Yeah, it was pretty diabolical. Okay. Xuanmen glanced at Shushian's wrist, then closed his eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. If he looked any longer, he might not be able to resist throwing this trouble-stirring evil spirit to the ground. "Shouldn't you let me into the city to find a doctor?" Shushian said, sounding very reasonable and earnest. "Answer me! Don't just stand there. If you keep standing there, you'll rot too." The square-faced guard shuddered. In a state of shock, he stepped aside. "Thank you," Xuanmin said indifferently. He strode into the city with his rotting passenger. As he moved, the guards on either side stepped back, pressing themselves against the city gate as if getting too close would cause them to start decaying like Shushian. And yes, it is technically effective. I will give you that trouble. Yes. The guards watched their retreating figures, unable to snap out of their daze. After a long while, one of the guards exclaimed, "Look!" The others turned their heads and saw the guard pointing at the spot where Shushian had been standing. The hand is gone!" There was only a branch of white plum blossoms where Shushan's hand had fallen. Stunned, the guards chased after them, only to find that the group had turned down an alley and disappeared. They were about to report to their captain when they noticed the square-faced guard still standing there like a statue. Ligua, Ligua, the other guards called from a distance. Don't just stand there, go see a doctor. If the clinic is busy, go to the nearest Fang family pharmacy to get some medicine. It's the triple Fang family pharmacy, say that 5 times fast. They've been prescribing a lot of medicine recently, so they must know the formula by heart. We'll cover your post. Hurry back, okay? Lee mumbled in a daze. He propped his long saber against the city gate and stumbled toward the clinic in the western part of the city, his mind heavy with worry. Meanwhile, Xuanmin and the others were following Jiang Xining in the opposite direction through an alley towards his elder sister's house in the east. As they walked, Shi Tuzhang couldn't help nervously glancing backward, worried that a large group of guards might be chasing after them. Stop craning your neck. No one's following us, Shushan said, able to tell just by listening whether anyone was pursuing them. Why are you being so cautious? The others thought, do you have the right to say that? Every time they entered a new county, this wise one would cause some public spectacle, almost as if the trip would be wasted if he didn't cause a scene. Jiang Xining had been to Anqing before, though not often, so he knew the way. They took a few turns, then arrived at a small gate. The entrance was small. It wasn't the main gate, but a back door facing a narrow alley. On either side of the door were round stone carvings flanking 2 stone steps. The main gate leads to the pharmacy. It's always busy. Family members usually use this back door that leads to the backyard of the residence, Jiang Xining explained. He knocked on the door. Bald donkey, let me sit down for a bit, Shushan said, encouraging Xuanmin to set him down on one of the stone carvings. All right, 58. He raised his exposed wrist bone before he reached toward it, and somehow pulled his real hand out of it. Please cast another cleansing spell. I accidentally got some tissue stuck on my sleeve. Ew. Shitu Zhang, Jiang Xining, who was knocking on the door, and even Lu Nianqi, who rarely interacted with the others, all turned their backs on him with expressions of disgust. Xuanmin glanced at Chu Xian's sleeve and also looked away. Given his aversion to filth, even that one glance was pushing his limits. He was clearly exasperated and refused to cast a cleansing spell. Why bother when it wouldn't be enough to cleanse the image of rotting flesh from his mind? Instead, he drew a line across Shushan's elbow with his finger and sliced the sleeve. It fell away as if cut by a knife, leaving Shushan's arm bare from the elbow down. Xuanmin gripped the blood-smeared half-sleeve and lit it on fire with a talisman without another word. Soon it was reduced to ashes. I mean, that is technically one way to deal with it. Sorry, 1 second. He cut sleeves. He did cut sleeves. I wasn't even thinking about that. Shushan, who had never imagined anyone daring to mar his clothes, let alone the bald donkey doing the honor, 59, was left bare-armed and shocked. He stared for a few seconds, then lifted Xuanmin's monk robes and vigorously wiped his regrown skin on them. He then thrust his clean hand in front of Xuanmin. Burn your clothes next, Shushan snapped. Since I'm bare-armed, you'll have to go bare-legged to appease my anger. Jiang Xining eyed Xuanmen sympathetically and was about to say something when the narrow door in front of them creaked open. A girl in her teens poked her head out. Who is it? A familiar face. Recognizing her, Jiang Xining smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. Oh, it's Xing. Before he could finish, the girl let out a scream and slammed the door shut. Jiang Xining stood in front of the closed door, bewildered, before realizing what had happened. For a moment, his expression wavered somewhere between regret and bemusement. It was hard to say which one. So, here's what happened. He knocked on the door of his sister's residence, and he's dressed as himself, who died 3 years ago. So, if that's like a cousin or his niece, like I can totally understand why she reacted like that. Of like, "Oh, hey, it's my sweet ah!" Like I feel like Jiang Xining's usually a little more socially aware than that. Like he dropped the ball on that one. Um Shuxian glanced at Jiang Xining. Noticing his expression, he pointed at Shi Tuzheng. Old man, weren't you afraid of ghosts? Are you still scared after seeing a ghost as foolish as him? Think about how you were trembling earlier. Doesn't it seem a bit embarrassing now? Old man. Oh, hello, Esper lady. Um, you have not missed a ton. Last time we ended where the guards are about to come up to the room to arrest them. What ended up happening is Shushian turned into a dragon, flew off, burst down the wall. They were like, "Oh my god." Um Fell in a lake. Now they're actually outside the county that Jiang Xining's sister lives in. They go through, there's apparently a plague happening. Um they kind of trick their way in. Now they're squabbling, and they finally have reached the residence. Jiang Xining knocks on the door. Someone comes out that he recognizes. He's like, "Oh hey!" They run off screaming. So that's where we are. Yeah, no, I agree. He probably just forgotten his excitement truffle. Yes, and Shushian causing so much chaos. But yeah, we'll keep going. Shitu Zhang turned his head away and wiped his face, muttering to himself, I just look old for my age. Sure, I'm not young anymore, but I can still carry loads, walk, and run. Calling me an old man seems a bit much, doesn't it? But yes, there you go. But the guy in front of him was an important wise one, so he couldn't afford to argue with him. Jiang Xining had been on the edge of melancholy when his mood was swiftly swept aside by a casual remark from Xu Xian. He glared in Xu Xian's direction. Oh, I guess that would technically be another Jiang Xining suffering, so that's a 21. Xu Xian, you want symptoms? I got all the symptoms. Yeah, no, he was excited. I guess this is what they mean by bad company corrupts good character. Spending so much time with you is lowering my intelligence. He pulled up his robe and stepped aside, ushering them toward the door. Since it's broad daylight, I won't haunt their doorstep any longer. Someone else should knock on the door. Everyone's gaze turned toward Shi Tuzhang. Me? Shi Tuzhang pointed uncertainly at his own nose. He hadn't handled any of the challenges they'd faced on their journey so far. This was the first time he'd been asked to take the lead. Shushan pointed at Lu Nianqi with a serious expression. A fortune teller. He then pointed at himself. A cripple. He concluded with Xuanmin. An alms seeker. He shrugged. Is there a single normal person here? It was a sorry situation. Shi Tuzhang was the only one who could pass for average. Ouch. Reluctantly, he stepped forward and knocked on the door again. From inside the courtyard came another scream. Ah! The girl from earlier seemed even more terrified this time. Shi Tuzhang turned back with an innocent expression. Once bitten, twice shy, can't blame her. He softened his voice, coaxing her. Open the door, little miss. There's no ghost here. I'm a good person. They were all stupefied by the quality of his good person impression. Shu Xian stared at Shi Tuzhang's shoulders for a moment, then reached out and yanked him back. Enough. You could probably summon a ghost killer like Zhang Kui with that act. Xingzi, what's all this shouting about? An elder woman's voice called from inside the courtyard. Don't scare the guests in the front hall. Aunt Chen, there's a ghost! The girl responded, sounding on the verge of tears. Nonsense. How could there be a ghost in broad daylight? Aunt Chen replied, half amused, half exasperated. Our medicine hall only saves lives, never harms anyone. What ghost are you talking about? It's true. I just saw little Jiang Xiaoyi standing outside the door. Xingzi insisted. Young Master Jiang, and Chen paused. You don't mean. Yes, Xingzi said. I heard knocking, and when I opened the door, he was standing there. He even smiled at me and called my name. How could I not recognize him? The little girl's voice trembled like she was moments from a breakdown. There was knocking. Yes, and more just now. I didn't dare listen closely. Shu Xian, ever the troublemaker, chose the perfect moment to knock on the door again. Both the old woman and the girl inside were frightened to the point of tears. Xuanmin wordlessly grabbed Shu Xian's mischievous hand and pulled it back. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open again. The person who answered was an elderly man with graying hair and a gentle, respectful demeanor. Behind him stood two figures. The girl, who had run off earlier, Xingzi, and a short, elderly woman who must have been Aunt Chen. To avoid further scaring anyone, Jiang Xining had already transformed back into his paper form and tucked himself into Shu Xian's pocket, though he couldn't resist peeking out to observe the situation. After all, he was the one who had caused this mess. Uncle Chen, he softly murmured when he saw the gray-haired old man. He knew everyone at the Feng family medicine hall quite well. Some very well, in fact. The Feng and Jiang families had been connected for many years, with one family practicing medicine and the other dealing in medicinal herbs. So, just a quick aside. Xiao Yi is used by servants to respectfully address the young master of the family. So when they said, I just saw little Jiang Xiao Yi, they were being respectful. Their paths had crossed by chance, and they had maintained ties ever since. Jiang Xining had visited the Feng family as a child, and later his sister had married into the family. When I was young, Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen had made him sweet buns. Meeting them like this, separated by life and death, he couldn't call out to them. Uncle Chen's hearing wasn't what it used to be, so he didn't catch Jiang Xining's soft murmur. Squinting his slightly cloudy eyes, he surveyed the group of weirdos at the door. Might I ask what brings you here? He asked politely. And Chen nudged Xingzi from behind. Didn't you say you saw little Jiang Xiaoyi? Where is he? These people look normal. Xingzi shook her head in confusion. She didn't understand what was happening either. Once again, Shi Zhang was pushed forward to explain. Pardon the intrusion, he said, cupping his hands in a courteous gesture. Despite his usual timidity around Shushian and the others, he knew how to behave in front of ordinary people. We've come from Ningyang in Huaishou to look for... He suddenly faltered, turning to Shushian with a questioning look. Who are we looking for again? Before Shushian could answer, Aunt Chen interjected. Are you here to see the young mistress? Yes, Jiang Xining whispered. Yes, Shi Tuzhang nodded. I knew it! Xingzi blurted out. It can't be a coincidence. I just saw little Jiang Xiaoyi, and now people from Ningyang are here. I wasn't seeing things after all. So little Jiang Xiaoyi. Uncle Chen shushed her and turned back to Shi Tuzhang, cupping his hands again. Sir, if I may ask, do you have any proof of your identity? Shi Tuzhang turned to the group with a bewildered expression, mouthing exaggeratedly. Proof? Shu Xian was about to reply in the negative when he suddenly remembered something and clapped his hands. Ah, right. Without hesitation, he shoved his hand into Xuanmin's hidden waist pouch. Xuanmin grabbed the hand, rummaging through his pouch. What are you looking? Found it, Shu Xian said, twisting his wrist. Let go. Xuanmin released his hand, and Shu Xian pulled out the silver medical bell. When Jiang Xining couldn't carry it himself, Shu Xian had casually stuffed it into Xuanmin's pouch. Now he retrieved the bell just as casually as if it were his own. Would this medical bell count as proof? Shu Xian held out the bell. He'd been sitting on a stone carved by the doorway, partially hidden by Shi Tuzhang. Now that he'd spoken, Aunt Chen and the others noticed him. Xingzi's eyes swept over him, and her face flushed with heat. She hid behind Uncle Chen. Uncle Chen took the silver bell. He noticed the character Jiang engraved on the side of the bell. It only took him a single glance to say, I've seen this before. Dr. Jiang always carried it. He handed it back to Shu Xian. However, the Jiang family hadn't died of natural causes. They had perished in a fire. It was only natural for Uncle Chen to be so suspicious when strangers showed up with the Jiang family belongings. You are from the Jiang family? Uncle Chen asked cautiously. Neighbors, Shi Tuzhang said, opting for a safer term since they couldn't claim to be relatives. We were entrusted by little Jiang Xiaoyi Xining to deliver this family heirloom to his elder sister. There are also some unsolved matters regarding his parents that we need to discuss with her. No wonder, Xingzi suddenly said, but the young mistress isn't here right now. Would you like to come in and have some tea while you wait? Her attitude was a complete turnaround from her earlier terror, leaving Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen stunned. Weren't you the one screaming in fear just a moment ago? But the girl didn't seem to notice Aunt Chen's look. Her gaze kept shifting to Shushian. I might end up stopping like one chapter early tonight because I'm actually kind of tired. I might end up rearranging chapters a little bit for next time. We'll see. We'll see if I can make it. Okay. Just getting really tired. Her attitude was a complete turnaround from her earlier terror, leaving Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen stunned. Weren't you the one screaming in fear just a moment ago? But the girl didn't seem to notice Aunt Chen's look. Her gaze kept drifting back to Shushian. Thank you, Shi Tuzhang said without hesitation. After all the trials they'd been through, flying through the sky, diving into water, a seat and a cup of hot tea were more than welcome. Thank you. Since Xingxi had invited them in and Shitu Zhang had accepted, Uncle Chen had no choice but to usher the group inside. Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen led the way while Xingzi lingered by the door, holding it open. Shitu Zhang entered first, followed by Lu Nianqi, who stumbled slightly as he crossed the threshold. Uncle Chen noticed and turned back. He hesitated. "Young master, I'm half blind," Lu Nianqi replied coldly to Uncle Chen's silence. Xingzi lingered behind Lu Nianqi, intending to guide Xu who was still sitting on the stone carving. Then she could only stare as she watched Xuanmin scoop Xu up into his arms. Uncle Chen turned back and saw this scene, prompting him to ask, "And this gentleman?" "Half paralyzed," Xu said matter-of-factly. Uncle Chen had to wonder, what kind of group was this? A half-paralyzed man, a half-blind boy, a middle-aged man of modest stature, and a monk who barely spoke. They didn't seem like much of a threat. Uncle Chen decided to set aside his doubts and welcome them inside. "When will your young mistress return?" Xu asked Xingzi, noticing her flushed face. Found her amusing, naive, and with a hint of without a he found her amusing, naive, and without a hint of guile. When he wasn't causing trouble, Xu could be quite charming. His words were polite, but his tone carried a lazy, nonchalant air. And yes, they're a very odd group. Okay. Yeah, no, that'll be enough. Xingzi's face turned even redder at his question. The young mistress went to examine Madame Xiao. The young master went with her. They left before dawn and should be back within the hour." "Examine?" "Our young mistress is amazing," Xingzi said proudly. "All the ladies in the county come to her when they are unwell. She's very accurate in her diagnoses, and her treatments always work. It's just a little tiring for her." As expected of someone from a medical family, Xu thought. Still, as everyone marveled at her skill, the group couldn't help but feel a twinge of worry. With the plague rumored to be rampant in Qingping County, doctors were the most susceptible to infection. They sat drinking tea in the guest hall in the backyard, expecting to wait for a while. However, before they could finish a cup of tea, a disheveled boy around 10 years old stumbled into the courtyard. "It's bad! It's bad! Something happened to the young master and mistress!" he shouted. Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen, who were carrying a tea tray into the room, were startled. The tray clattered to the ground, scattering porcelain shards that hit Shitu Zhang's and Xuanmin's legs. They were so shocked they forgot to apologize. "Something's happened!" 4 voices rang out in unison. Uncle Chen's, Aunt Chen's, Xingzi's, and Jiang Xining's. But in the urgency of the moment, no one noticed his voice. "What happened?" Aunt Chen grabbed the boy who had come to deliver news. "Speak up, child! Why are you the only one back?" The boy, who had clearly run the whole way, was gasping for breath and spoke in broken sentences. The young master," he heaved another breath, "when we turned the corner onto Jiqing Street, 7 or 8 beggars suddenly jumped out from a dead-end alley. They kidnapped the young master and mistress. They were so fast, it was like they'd been lying in wait." Everyone exclaimed in shock. "What? Kidnapped? Where did they take them?" "I don't know." The boy was on the verge of tears and filled with guilt. "The young master and mistress pushed me aside, and I fell to the ground. By the time I got up, they were gone. I couldn't catch up, and I couldn't find them." He began to sob. "I'm useless." "Did you see what direction they went?" Xuanmin interjected. The boy seemed to notice the strangers in the room for the first time. He was taken aback by the question. South? But there are too many alleys there. They disappeared after a few turns. Find something your young master and mistress touched recently. Xuanmin's gaze landed on Lu Nianqi. Right, we have a human compass, Shu Xian said, patting Lu Nianqi's head like he was a treasure. Lu Nianqi expressionlessly brushed his hand away. Something they've recently touched. Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen were confused. Shu Xing, however, was quick-witted. She clapped her hands. A handkerchief? Will a handkerchief do? Sure, Shu Xian said. Please fetch the handkerchief. Xingzi, still red, hurried out of the room and returned moments later with the handkerchief. Here, but what's it for? To find where your young master and mistress are. Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen were completely baffled by what was happening. They rushed around the room like ants on a hot pan. Lu Nianqi produced his wooden stick and hovered it over the embroidered handkerchief, then drew a series of lines on the ground. His actions looked like those of a shaman performing a ritual, leaving Uncle Chen, Aunt Chen, and Xingzi astonished. What is this? One of them murmured. Lu Nianqi exuded an aura of profound mystery as he retracted his wooden stick and traced the marks on the ground. He spoke with the demeanor of a sage. Is there a mountain path nearby with slopes made of piled stones on either side? The slopes are covered with wild wood, and in the woods, he traced the marks again. There's a grave with a small pond beside it. Next to the pond is a black rock shaped like a crouching turtle. Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen looked increasingly puzzled as he described the scene. When he mentioned the turtle-shaped black rock, their expressions changed. There is such a place, yes. Where? Mount Xiaonan. About 5 minutes later, a carriage appeared on the stone path at the foot of Mount Xiaonan in Qingping County. Inside the carriage were Shu Xian and his companions. Uncle Chen was driving. For the sake of convenience and efficiency, Shu Xian's group had planned to take with them someone who knew the way and could drive the carriage. Uncle Chen seemed calm by nature, so even if he saw something unusual, he could probably handle it. My worry is that he seems like an old man, so I really hope they don't give him a heart attack. Shu Xian, Xuanmin, and Lu Nianqi boarded the carriage, then silently watched as Xingzi and Aunt Chen also climbed inside. So, why did you two come along again? Shu Xian asked eventually. After all, even Shi Tu Zhang had been left behind at the Fang residence. And Xuanmin just casually picks his cat up. Yep. Any bets on whether the Turtle Rock is cursed? I wasn't thinking about that, but probably it's a good 40-60 either way. Okay. Aunt Chen was an excitable person. At the questions, she slapped her thigh and nearly wailed. Before the old mistress passed away last year, she entrusted the young master and mistress to me and Uncle Chen. It's only been a year, and now they're gone. How could I face her, oh mistress? She was about to let out a long wail when Shu Xian raised a finger and waved it. Shh, all right, I understand. Aunt Chen's eyes widened as she found her mouth sealed shut. There were no armrests in the carriage, so Shu Xian, acting like a lord, leaned back against the carriage wall. With nowhere to rest his elbow, he used Xuanmin's leg as an armrest, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And you, miss? Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Xuanmin glance at his elbow and raise his hand, like he had some thoughts about removing the audacious limb from his knee. Shu Xian turned, ready to play rogue versus bald donkey, but then he noticed Then Shushan turned, ready to play rogue versus bald donkey, but then he noticed Xuanmin gazing around the carriage. Seeming to think better of it, Xuanmin retracted his hand and let Shushan do as he pleased. Ha! Shushan wondered what that was about. We have reached 60! Yes. Bald donkey! And we have a little picture. But Xingzi's tearful words interrupted his thinking. I've been with the mistress for over 5 years. If something happens to her, how will I live? I'm just so anxious. I can't sit still at home. Please don't make me get off the carriage. I promise I won't cause any trouble. Causing trouble isn't the issue. Okay, that's fine. I don't mind having more people along, but you should be prepared for what's coming. Yeah, his expression definitely kind of is like the audacity. It is kind of cute though. Causing trouble isn't the issue. I don't mind having more people along, but you should be prepared for what's to come. Aunt Chen and Xingzi blinked, not understanding what he meant. All right, things have settled, Lu Nianqi said before anyone could speak up. They've stopped moving and are now in one place. It's a deserted village? Why are the houses all crumbling? A deserted village? You mean one village? Oh heavens, why would they go there? That place has been abandoned for years. Not only is it deserted, but it's haunted. Going there is a death sentence. A ghost village. Aunt Chen slapped the carriage wall several times. Lao Chen! Lao Chen! Lives are at stake. Hurry the horses up. They were still taking the road to Mount Xiaonan because Lu Nianqi, the half-baked fortune teller, was only intermittently accurate. With the kidnappers constantly on the move, they needed to get closer to pinpoint their location. Now that the kidnappers had stopped, Shushan had no patience to continue chasing them in a meandering fashion. Hold on tight, Shushan said meaningfully to Aunt Chen and Xingzi across from him. Just as Aunt Chen settled down, the carriage jolted. Ah! She was startled, thinking the carriage had hit a bumpy patch of road. She grabbed onto the wooden slats of the carriage wall. Then, without warning, a fierce wind howled. The entire carriage tilted sharply. The horse pulling the carriage let out a panicked whinny. Oh man, that poor horse. What's happening? What's going on? Aunt Chen nearly lost her grip on the slats and was on the verge of tears again. Xingzi clung tightly to her arm, shrieking. Miss, please keep it down, Shushan said, raising a hand. The carriage door slammed with a bang. The door shut tight. You won't fall out. Aunt Chen and Xingzi stared at him with wide eyes, as if they had seen a ghost. Did you touch the door? Xingzi asked dazedly. How did it... Before she could recover from the shock, she felt the tilting carriage suddenly become weightless, and her heart skipped a beat. It was as if the entire carriage had been lifted into the air. What are they doing with the horse? Because, is it just going to be a Pegasus situation here? Because, again, that poor horse. The old woman and the young girl lifted the carriage curtain and screamed in unison. Ah! We're flying! Tuxian pressed a finger into his ear, regretting his rash decision. He poked Xuanmin in the side. Bald donkey, bring the one in front into... Before he could finish, the carriage was filled with another blood-curdling scream. Ah! So much for being calm. Schwanman stuck his snow-white sleeve outside the carriage curtain. With a thud, Uncle Chen's screaming head crashed into the carriage. His eyes were shut. And yes, I did not forget the bald donkey. We're up to 61. As Uncle Chen flailed blindly, Schwanman tugged him in through the window. However, he remained screaming from his position on the carriage floor. I mean, I would too. Once everyone was inside, Shu Xian stretched one arm outside the carriage like a lazy cat and waved his hand. Xingzi gaped in a daze. The carriage tilted again, and this time Aunt Chen lost her grip, falling to one side. Xingzi, still stupefied, was knocked over and fell onto Lu Nianqi, who was sitting at the edge of the seat. Trouble magnets, right? And they could probably be already mistaken for a married couple with the rules of propriety and space. He clutched his wooden stick tighter as he slammed against the carriage wall with a thud. In the aftermath, he wore an expression of utter defeat. The howling wind, summoned by Shu Xian, lifted the carriage higher into the air, and the horses' whinnies echoed as they shot toward the clouds. As quick as lightning, they soon descended from the clouds and hurtled toward the ground. Inside the carriage, Aunt Chen and Xingzi were frozen in shock. They slid to the other side of the carriage wall as it tilted. Lu Nianqi silently slid with them. For Aunt Chen and Xingzi, it felt like only a breath had passed before the carriage landed again. "We're here," Shu Xian said, flicking a finger. The carriage door swung open, revealing their surroundings. Xuanmin likes his personal space. Shu Xian likes Xuanmin's personal space. Yeah. I love that meme. It's really funny. They were by a deserted village that was just as Aunt Chen had described. The houses were dilapidated and eerie, overgrown with weeds and devoid of any signs of life. Even though the sky was brightening and the east was turning white, the freshest time of day, the place felt too ominous to enter. A crow cawed hoarsely as it flew out of the deserted village, making Xingzi and the others shiver and shrink back into the carriage. Because the village was uninhabited, even the slightest sound was amplified. Just as Xuanmin stepped out of the carriage, a woman's scream echoed from deep within the village. "That's the mistress!" Xingzi cried out. "That's her voice! She really is there!" Xuanmin tilted his head. "Wait here," he said to Shu Xian before walking off toward the source of the scream. Shu Xian, leaning against the carriage wall like a lord, nodded. "All right, saves me the trouble. Hurry back." Xuanmin frowned as he surveyed the village's feng shui. To be honest, the village did have some serious issues. It was like an empty shell, missing something crucial. That absence had turned what should have been an excellent location into a dead zone. As for what that thing was... Sorry, I'm just making sure my slowly falling ceiling lights aren't about to touch the candle I have going. Because, much as I love excitement in my life, that is not the kind of excitement I want on a Tuesday night. Xuanmin frowned as he surveyed... I already read that. Xuanmin pondered for a moment, then strode forward. As he walked, he reached for the string of copper coins at his wrist. Or at his waist. There was nothing there. Shu Xian, who had shifted to lean against the carriage door, narrowed his eyes as he watched Xuanmin's retreating figure. There he goes. Then he saw Xuanmin, who had only walked a few steps, turn back. Shu Xian tilted his head up as Xuanmin approached the carriage door. The latter lightly wrapped the outer wall of the carriage with his knuckles and extended his slender, elegant hand toward Shu Xian. "What do you want?" Shu Xian asked. He really didn't know. The copper coins. Inside the carriage, Xingzi stared at Xuanmen's face, thinking to herself how handsome the monk was. She glanced at Chuxian and thought he was equally stunning. I guess technically I would count that as a face count, so we're up to 12. However, her mind was in turmoil, struck by a thunderbolt of realization. Why is this monk asking for money from Shu Gonzi? It's a respectful address for a young man, usually of high status. Before she could figure it out, Xuan Min, now holding a string of copper coins, turned on his heel and strode away again into the deserted village. The faint clinking of the copper coins echoed softly, carried by the strange wind of the village, adding layers of reverberation. Shushian tapped his fingers rhythmically on his numb knees, matching the sound of the coins, waiting for Xuan Min to finish quickly. She has every right to admire the scenery. However, after a while, his slender fingers paused in their tapping. Something was wrong. It had been quite some time, and Xuanmen's figure had disappeared, yet the sound of the coins hadn't grown fainter at all. The crisp clinking abruptly distorted. Then a faint buzzing noise rose from beneath the ground, sounding eerily familiar. The buzzing filled Shushian's ears until his mind went blank for a moment. A long-forgotten scene resurfaced in his memory. It was during the early summer on the coast of Huameng County, right before his tendons and bones were ripped apart. Countless gold threads descended from the sky. Some pierced his body, pinning him to the ground, while others wrapped around his scales, tightening like a massive cage. The golden threads were as fine as hair. Even when they pierced his body, they didn't cause much bleeding because the wounds were too small. However, the lack of blood didn't mean there was no pain. The threads blazed, scorching his bones from within and his scales from without. The slightest movement caused him excruciating pain, far worse than being devoured by 10,000 ants. Oh my. That's awful. But who was Shushian? If he wanted to move, then even if 10,000 arrows pierced his heart and pinned him to the ground, he would endure the agony and pull them out one by one before twisting off the head of whoever dared to harm him. Physical pain had never been enough to stop him. The only reason he hadn't ripped himself free had been because it was the day of a once-in-a-century calamity. Calamities came in different forms, but most often they were lightning tribulations. For Shushian, these were the least fearsome. When a true dragon emerged from the sea, it was always accompanied by thunderclouds. He was used to it, in terms of spectacle, at least. No matter how terrifying the lightning was, it wouldn't make him blink. Ordinary lightning rarely struck him, as it often came at his behest. Even if it did, it was nothing more than a tickle. The lightning during a tribulation was different. It didn't avoid him. Instead, it chased him, striking with one bolt after another. Each hit drew blood. The lightest wounds left his flesh torn, but worse was the pain of damage to his true spirit. That was unbearable. If his cultivation wasn't strong enough, his spirit could be shattered, and he would turn to dust on the spot. To survive, most people facing a calamity would go to great lengths to create barriers for themselves using whatever means necessary. Shushian couldn't do that because his every movement affected the vast rivers, lakes, and seas of the mortal world. If he stirred, the waters would become turbulent. Places prone to flooding would be on the brink of disaster, and a single misstep could submerge entire cities. Therefore, Shushian usually reverted to his dragon form during calamities. His massive body provided enough surface area for the lightning to strike without completely destroying him. If he were in human form, he would be reduced to a bloody mess, which was hardly presentable. During minor calamities, he would find a deserted island, stretch out, and let the lightning strike him as it pleased. Afterward, he would sleep there until his wounds healed and the bleeding stopped. Then slip into the sea to recover his true spirit before causing more mischief. However, during major calamities, he couldn't be so careless. The lightning during such events was too powerful for mortal locations to withstand. If it struck a deserted island, the island would be shattered and sink into the sea after a few bolts. If it struck a populated area, it would cause even greater disaster. To prevent the lightning from harming the mortal world, Shushan would soar into the sky and wrap himself in thick black clouds. The thunderbolts would descend from the heavens, stop within the clouds, and strike him alone. To the people below, the thunder would sound terrifying, but cause no harm. So, okay, even though he's sassy and loves to mess with people, like all of this, he's still a good guy. Like, he didn't have to do this. He didn't have to think about the people. He could have just protected himself, come what consequences come. But he actually decided to take the hits and make sure there was no harm. That's kind of admirable. This past early summer, Shushan had faced a major calamity. That calamity had been more grueling than usual, leaving his spirit severely damaged. Unable to remain in the clouds, he had plummeted to the coast. Damage to the true spirit caused confusion and unconsciousness. When the countless golden threads had bound him and pinned him to the ground, he could barely open his eyes, let alone see who was behind it or break free. For a long time afterward, he couldn't even remember the scene clearly. Fragments of it only haunted him like nightmares. Now, as his mind trembled, that forgotten scene flashed before his eyes. Was it a coincidence or something else? Either way, Shushan was left momentarily stunned by the recollection. At the end of those fine gold threads, there had been a figure. Someone dressed in white, it seemed. However, their details were obscured, leaving only a silhouette. They were tall and slender, their robes fluttering in the wind. Strands of hair whipping through the air like their robes framed their face. Somehow, there was something undeniably strange about it. As the buzzing in his mind subsided, Shushan finally emerged from that memory. He heard a woman's concerned voice beside him. What's wrong with you? Wake up! Miss Shingzi, stop shaking me or my head might fall off. Shushan pinched the bridge of his nose, his eyes still closed as he spouted nonsense. You're awake? Shu Shing exclaimed in delight before she realized she'd been so panicked that she grabbed Shushan by the shoulders. She yanked her hands back as if burned. You suddenly lost consciousness and we couldn't even feel your breath. We were so scared and I just, uh, um... Shushan raised an eyebrow and lazily opened his eyes. He squinted and touched the spot between his nose and upper lip. So you pinched my philtrum? Xingzi leaned against the carriage wall, staring at the ceiling as if she had been wronged beyond redemption. Yes, I pinched it. Thanks for the efforts, Shushan said with a slight smile. He turned much more serious as he looked toward the deserted village. Huh? Xingzi, surprised by the thanks, blushed and waved her hands. No need to thank me. I'm just glad you're awake. Of course, Shushan wasn't listening to her anymore. His gaze was fixed on one spot in the village. Why was there still no sign of Xuanmin? That bald Shushan cut himself off, thinking it might be inappropriate to refer to Xuanmin that way in front of strangers. He coughed and adopted a more formal tone. How long was I out? Did the monk do anything after entering the village? I love how grabbing shoulders or pinching someone's nose counts as risque behavior. So, that... Wake up! Anything? Xingzi shook her head, her face filled with worry. It's been about 10 minutes and we haven't heard anything. Should we go in and look for him? Perhaps the earlier flight through the sky had intimidated these three mortals in the carriage. Despite their growing anxiety, they obediently followed Shushian's lead, not daring to take matters into their own hands. Nonetheless, with so much time having passed, who knew what dangers might have risen? Have arisen. Sorry. Shushian frowned and flicked at his wrist. Bookworm, why haven't you said anything? He had no qualms about calling out to Jiang Xining. These mortals have already flown through the sky. Why would they be afraid of ghosts? But it was strange. With his elder sister and brother-in-law kidnapped and taken into this eerie village, Jiang Xining hadn't even poked his head out. It was unlike him. Bookworm, Jiang Xining. The mention of the name, Uncle Chen, Aunt Chen, and Xingzi all turned to look at Shushian. Little Chiang Xiaoyi, did you just call for him? Aunt Chen asked, her voice trembling. That is not Aunt Chen's voice. I'm sorry. Yep, Shushian said. He opened the pouch at his waist to check for him. It was empty. Great. Jiang Xining was long gone. Shushian gazed toward the village with his face flat. That fool ghost must have slipped away with Xuan Min in the chaos. The sky gradually darkened, but the early morning was cold and heavy with moisture. The entire village was shrouded in a thick white mist, with only the dark outlines of the dilapidated houses visible. Shushian called without turning his head. Lu Nianqi. I'm here. Lu Nianqi quietly responded from within the carriage. What do you need? His tone sounded somewhat resigned, as he was currently sandwiched between two shaking figures, Uncle Chen on his left and Aunt Chen on his right. The couple, perhaps viewing Shushian as some kind of divine being, didn't dare approach him. They instead huddled close to Lu Nianqi for comfort. Can you figure out what that bald Xuan Min is doing right now? Shushian asked, his eyes still fixed on the mist. I can try, Lu Nianqi said, but I'll need something the monk recently touched. Shushian was about to speak when Lu Nianqi cut him off. The carriage is too big. It won't work. Shushian fell silent, thought for a moment, then turned and extended a hand into the carriage. Will my hand do? A silence fell. Something felt off, or maybe everything felt off. Living things don't work either. I can only scry with inanimate objects, Lu Nianqi said, unafraid of Shushian's potential wrath. Unless you're willing to sacrifice yourself, I can try calculating. Shushian snorted coldly and turned away. Right, how many pages is this actually? It's about 20, which is not terrible. Tell you what, I'm going to run to the bathroom real quick, and then we're going to finish out this chapter. I got kind of a little bit of a second wave, but I do need to use the bathroom. So I will be right back. Then we will continue. I also want to put this back up. Okay. Yeah, no worries, Annika. Good night. Okay, our last chapter for tonight. That's book 3. Okay. Wow, that chapter took over an hour. Wow. I'll see you Thursday, Annika, for a good couple days. All right, to 11:30. Okay. All right. Chapter 21, The Benevolent Lord. At that moment, deeper inside the desolate Wen village, a heated argument erupted from a large mansion. It was a two-story building with two structures connected by a long corridor, forming a square courtyard. It was unclear what had originally been planted in the yard, but only waist-high wild grass and a withered old tree remained. The windows of the various rooms were decayed, the paper long torn. The wind howled through the hallways, creating an eerie, unsettling sound that could send shivers down anyone's spine. The argument was coming from the eastern room on the first floor of the front building, the only room not exposed to the wind. A hoarse and resentful male voice rang out from within. "Didn't you say that listening to you would be the right move? Now look at us. We can't even get out. What else could we do? If we kept going, would old Liu, Jianzi, and Xiao Shitu still be alive?" Another voice retorted. "At least here we have a roof over our heads to keep the rain off. Why didn't you complain this morning when you found those mushrooms?" In the eastern room, several people dressed as beggars were huddled together. They were all disheveled and filthy, and their clothes, which looked like they hadn't been washed in ages, emitted a sour, rotten smell. That's unfortunate. But that wasn't the only odor in the room. Mingled with the stench of decay was the heavy scent of blood. The man with the hoarse voice had arms that ended abruptly at the wrists. The skin on his wrists had been worn smooth, indicating that his hands had been severed many years, if not decades ago. So, I'm not 100% sure if this applies to ancient Chinese times, but like I know olden days thievery a lot of time like you'd have a punishment would be to have your hand cut off. 'Cause you use that hand to steal, you lose that hand in punishment. Not sure if that's the trend for ancient China. Anyway, a fire burned in front of the man with no hands, and a cracked clay pot rested on a wooden branch above the flames. The pot was boiling vigorously. The man muttered to himself, then used his wrist to scoop some wild vegetable leaves from a pile beside him and toss them into the pot. "What's the point of having food if we don't even know if we'll live to see tomorrow? Well, if we don't eat, we definitely won't survive. Just keep boiling that soup." It was the same person who had spoken who had replied. His face was covered in horrifying scars. He only had one eye. His other eyelid was sealed shut and sunken, suggesting that the eyeball was long gone. Around these two arguing men sat a circle of other beggars, some missing arms, others legs. A few who still had all their limbs were making large gestures, likely because they were deaf or mute. Behind them was a wooden bed on which lay three people, an old man and two children. The very old Liu Jianzi and Xiao Shitu that the one-eyed man had mentioned. They were covered with tattered, hole-ridden blankets that carried a faint musty smell, but at least they provided some cover. The three lying on the bed were breathing heavily and running fevers. Their faces were pale with an unnatural flush, and their lips were blistered and cracked. The skin on their necks, exposed outside the blankets, was almost entirely covered in large festering wounds. The heavy smell of blood emanating from these three the heavy smell of blood emanated from these three individuals. In the corner of the room, a young man and woman sat huddled together. They had gentle, refined features and a composed aura. Though their plain robes were simple and unadorned, they were neither torn nor moldy. Their hair was a little disheveled, but they stood out starkly among the group of ragged beggars. This young man and woman were Jiang Xining's sister, Jiang Shijing, and her husband Fang Chang. Fang Chang turned his head and whispered to his wife, Ah Ying, are you hurt? They had known each other since childhood, so Fang Chang always called his wife by her pet name. Jiang Shijing shook her head. What about you? She asked. I'm fine. Don't be afraid. It doesn't seem like they want to kill or rob us. It seems more like. Both their gazes fell on the bed where the three sick individuals lay. After the beggars had abducted them, they had untied the ropes binding their limbs, leaving only the ropes around their wrists. We had no other choice, one of the beggars gruffly said. Before they could explain themselves further, the room filled with an eerie noise. It sounded like someone slowly descending the stairs, their footsteps heavy and dragging, as if they were either in poor health or very old. The beggars stilled and exchanged uneasy glances. One of them counted the people in the room. 5, 6, 7, plus old Liu and the other 2. That makes 10. Everyone's here. The expressions of the beggars shifted to visible fear. If everyone was in this room, then who was the person descending the stairs? Stop with this ghostly nonsense, one of the braver beggars spat out. He left the room to investigate who was coming down the stairs. Time passed, but he never returned. Even after the footsteps faded, he was nowhere to be seen. 2 other beggars went out together to look for him. When they returned, they reported that they'd searched everywhere, upstairs and downstairs, in front of and behind the building, but had found no trace of the missing man. As they looked, a thick fog rolled into the village, so dense that they couldn't even see or feel the house next door. This bizarre situation reminded the beggars of the legends about Wen Village being haunted. They became so terrified that they huddled around the fire and no one dared leave the room again. The one-eyed man turned to Fang Cheng and Jiang Shi Jing. Would you 2 doctors like some of this mushroom and wild vegetable soup? You won't be able to leave for a while. Have some soup to warm yourselves up. Consider it our way of apologizing. And please don't hold this against us. Could you take a look at old Liu and the others? They're covered in sores, and if this continues, they won't survive. We've really had no other choice but to resort to desperate measures. Even though we're not living like proper humans, we still are afraid of death, the man with no hands added. But we can't just scrape together enough coins to hire a doctor or buy medicine, so we had to turn to banditry. It was just as the couple had guessed. Fang Chang shook his head. There have been many disasters in the past 2 years, with several famines. Life has been hard, and if you can't afford to pay, then you can't. But if you had come to us for help, could we really have turned you away? If I were to refuse treatment for the sake of a few coins, my wife would be the first to object. But he stared hard at the one-eyed man. Grabbing people off the street and tying them up is going too far. With the effort you put into capturing us, you could have done something else. We've thought about finding honest work, but no one wants to hire us. The man with no hands raised his wrist. People like us, with missing limbs, can't work as well as those who are whole. Anyone willing to hire us would be offering us a charity. In these times of disaster, when people can barely take care of themselves, who has the energy for charity? No one wants to hire you, Fang Chang said irritably. Did you even ask me if I would hire you before you kidnapped me? If you had asked, I can't pay you, but but can I work to pay off the debt? How do you know I wouldn't have agreed? The man with no hands was about to speak again when the slow footsteps on the stairs echoed once more. Oh, I've got an idea. Everyone in the room froze in fear, not daring to move. Goosey, you're the closest to the door. Go shut it, the one-eyed man hissed. Go see. A young man missing an arm sprang up like a startled bird, dashed to the door, and slammed it shut. He then scurried back to the fire, staring fearfully at the closed door. The one-legged beggar next to Gozi shifted his weight on his hand. I've just heard, mind you, that one village is haunted every year, he whispered. They say that at the end of winter, ghostly opera music fills the abandoned village. Gongs and drums echo far into the night, and there's eerie singing, too. Oh, it's terrifying. Yes, and they also say if you accidentally enter the village on a foggy day, you'll never find your way out. You can also hear coughing, clapping, or laughter. The beggars chattered on, scaring themselves silly. They huddled together, quivering, until the one-eyed man, his face pale, interrupted them with a gesture for silence. The slow footsteps seemed to emerge from a room upstairs and descend the stairs once more. They walked a few steps in the hall and stopped, as if someone had sat down in a chair. After a moment, the footsteps began again and continued their slow, dragging pace. They grew closer to the eastern room, becoming clearer and clearer until they stopped right outside the door. Everyone in the room felt their neck prickle, and they stared at the door in terrified silence. The door was so decayed that even if it were locked, one could knock it down with a little pushing. It offered scant protection. A few weak coughs sounded from outside the door. The coughing was faint, as it came from someone seriously ill. A few heavy breaths followed, then the footsteps dragged away toward the opposite room. The people in the room let out a collective sigh of relief. That relief was short-lived. They heard the door on the opposite room creak open, only to close a few seconds later. Then the footsteps began to creep back toward their room. Ooh. While the beggars were pale and sweating from fear, the people in the carriage by the village's stone stele breathed a sigh of relief, because they had just seen a figure emerge from the thick fog. The monk's fluttering white robes almost blended into the white mist. Master! The master is back! Xingzi cried out. Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen, who were in the carriage, quickly let go of Lu Nianqi and scrambled to the door to peer out. What about the young master and mistress? Are they back too? They stared at Xuanmin and the fog wrapped around him, but were disappointed to see that he was alone. Meanwhile, Shu Xian, who was watching Xuanmin's silhouette, frowned slightly. Xuanmin strode through the fog and reached the carriage. Master, you didn't find our young master and mistress? Aunt Chen asked. I found the location, but I couldn't get close. Couldn't get close? Xuanmin nodded. However, before he could finish, Aunt Chen and Uncle Chen collapsed onto the carriage floor, their eyes threatening to spill over with tears. They're such a perfect match. It's cute. Shuxian, however, narrowed his eyes and scrutinized Xuanmin from head to toe, then asked out of the blue, "When did you shave your head and become a monk?" Xuanmin turned to him with a puzzled expression. "When I was a child. Why?" "Are you sure? Didn't you say you didn't remember your past?" Shuxian's tone was unreadable, neither cold nor warm. Why would he suddenly demand to know this? Because the moment Xuanmin had emerged from the fog, his silhouette had looked strikingly similar to the figure at the end of the golden thread. The same flapping white robes, the same tall and strikingly similar to the figure at the end of the golden thread. The same flapping white robes, the same tall and slender build, the same extraordinary abilities. The only difference was that the figure at the end of the golden thread seemed to have the shadow of hair by his face. Although Xuanmin didn't know Shuxian's reason, he still answered, "I can recall some scenes from my childhood." But something in Shuxian's expression was too serious, or his tone was too inscrutable. Xuanmin paused and met Shuxian's eyes with his dark, calm ones. "I'm sure." Since the conversation at the inn, Shuxian had gained a deeper understanding of Xuanmin's character. Or rather, he had become certain of one thing. This bald donkey had at least one redeeming quality. He didn't lie. Hang on. So, 62. If he didn't remember something, he wouldn't fabricate a false memory to appease the questioner. He would simply admit he didn't remember. If he did remember but couldn't speak of it, he would state that it was not for discussion without tailoring his answer to suit the questioner's expectations. So Xuanmin's "I'm sure" carried weight. It meant he did remember fragmented scenes from his childhood, and in those scenes he was already a monk. Upon hearing this, Shuxian did not nod, shake his head, or respond. Instead, he continued to stare at Xuanmin. At this reaction, Xuanmin calmly asked, "You don't believe me?" "No." Shuxian reached out and hooked a finger, gesturing for Xuanmin. "Come a little closer." What the hell was that? Speaking of things clicking and stepping. Xuanmin responded in a deep voice. Though he was confused, he leaned forward a few inches. He thought Shuxian had something to say when he didn't want Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen to hear, so he waited in earnest for Shuxian to say something. What he got was the hand of an evil spirit patting his head. "Tisk tisk, you poor thing," Shuxian said. "Were you really shaved so young?" Xuanmin couldn't believe what he was hearing. Shuxian was getting out of hand. If no one disciplined him for 3 days, he would tear the roof off with his antics. Literally. The people in the carriage were stunned by Shuxian's actions, especially Xingzi, who even forgot to cry. "Aren't those two a bit too close?" she thought to herself. Her big round eyes fixed on Shuxian, but she accidentally met Xuanmin's gaze. He was handsome, especially his unruffled eyes that radiated stability and reliability, as if no one needed to fret as long as he wasn't worried, because he always had some solution. But for some reason, when she met those eyes, she felt guilty, though she couldn't say why. Yeah, girl, they are closed. That they are. Before Xingzi could look away, Xuanmin averted his gaze. He seemed nonplussed as he grasped Shuxian's jutting wrist and pulled it downward. Perhaps to prevent the dragon from taking advantage of the situation again, Xuanmin kept his fingers wrapped around Shuxian's wrist. Shuxian snorted through his nose. What? Is your head so precious that it can't be touched? Xuanmin ignored him. In fact, he wasn't gripping Shuxian that tightly, and the latter could have easily pulled away. But he didn't. The warmth from Xuanmin's fingers penetrated Shuxian's skin until the temperature of his wrist matched his hand. Shuxian's indulgent gaze fell upon Xuanmin's fingers. Indolent. I was like, wait a minute. Indolent gaze fell upon Xuanmin's fingers. In his mind, he once again conjured the silhouette of the figure at the end of the golden thread. It really did look just like Xuanmin, except for the shadow of hair. But Xuanmin had been a monk since childhood, and Shuxian's tendons had been extracted in early summer this year. That detail didn't match up. For Shuxian, as long as Xuanmin wasn't the person, it was fine. In fact, it was for the best. That's totally setting it up for him to be the person and just not know it. Oh, he's so the person. He's so the person. It's they stated it, and this author loves to be like, it couldn't be that. Thing explodes. Like, it's fine. Waterfall suddenly appears after an earthquake. Otherwise, Shushian decisively cut off that thought and changed the subject. You said you found their location but couldn't get close. You also said, however. However, what? Can't you see these people are going to cry from suspense? At this, Uncle Chen's and Aunt Chen's hopeful eyes shone. Xuanmin straightened up, glanced into the depths of the fog-shrouded village, and raised his other hand. He loosened his grip. With a clink, his string of copper coins dangled and swayed between his fingers. Xuanmin released Shuxian's wrist and tapped the 5 copper coins in a specific order, his expression unbothered. Indeed, I could not get close. However, if I can't go over there, I'll just bring it over here. With that, he closed his fingers, and the string of coins emitted a low hum. Maybe. Maybe a previous life. I mean, that brings into discussion of what defines a person. Do their memories define it, or does their physical form define it? But I'm not going to get into existentialism. Just think is what that's called. But I'm really tired, so my brain's not giving me big words. Indeed, I couldn't get close. However, if I can't go over there, I'll just bring it over here. With that, he closed his fingers, and the string of coins emitted a low hum. Suddenly, the red thread tightened. A loud booming noise echoed from the depths of the abandoned village, as if something had been uprooted from the ground. The people in the carriage were startled by the noise, exchanging glances. Just as they were beginning to feel uneasy, a black shape appeared in the thick white fog. Heavens! Look, what's that? Xingzi cried out, tugging at Aunt Chen's sleeve and pointing into the air. The black shadow rapidly approached, its outline quickly becoming clear. It was an entire dilapidated mansion, along with the patch of land it stood on. Xuanmin had uprooted it and dragged it toward them. Crash! The mansion landed before them, taking root on the barren ground. Uncle Chen, Aunt Chen, and Xingzi were stunned to discover what Xuanmin meant by "bring it here." They had never imagined such a grandiose method of relocation. For a moment, they gawked with their mouths open. As the mansion settled, they could hear screams coming from one of the rooms inside. Shushan noticed a thin figure clinging to the mansion's door, desperately holding on to the door knocker. "Bookworm, are you trying to become a door ornament?" he teased. The thin figure was none other than Jiang Xining, who had slipped out of Shushan's pocket. Waiting in the carriage for news of his sister was something he simply couldn't bear. As Shushan had guessed, he had taken advantage of the chaos to slip away and follow Xuanmin into the abandoned village. He had also tracked Xuanmin to the location where his sister and brother-in-law were. But unlike Xuanmin, who was human and couldn't approach the mansion, Jiang Xining, the ghost, had no trouble reaching the mansion door. However, before he could get in, the entire building had been unceremoniously hauled by Xuanmin. And before he could transform back into a paper figure, he had come face to face with Uncle Chen, Aunt Chen, and Xingzi. "Good heavens! Jiang, little Jiang Xiaoyi," Aunt Chen stammered, her words faltering. "Y- you're not. You're still. You're not dead, are you?" he wanted to ask, but the words "dead" felt too ominous to say. "Are you still alive?" also sounded awkward, so he remained tongue-tied, his words jumbled into incoherence. "I knew it! I knew I wasn't mistaken!" Xingzi, her eyes watering, tugged at Aunt Chen's arm. "I really saw little Jiang Xiaoyi knocking on the door, but, young master, you..." In the face of their bewildered gazes, Jiang Xining clasped his hands in a polite gesture. "I apologize for startling you earlier when I knocked." Hang on. Let me. One second. Okay. Sorry about that. Um. In the face of their bewildered gazes, Jiang Xining clasped his hands in a polite gesture. "I apologize for startling you earlier when I knocked on the door, Miss Xingzi. But you're now..." "Alas, I am but a wandering ghost," Jiang Xining replied with a bitter smile. "Uncle Chen, Aunt Chen, it's been a long time. Thank you for your concern." The mention of the phrase "wandering ghost," the people in the carriage fell silent, unsure of how to respond. The current situation wasn't exactly conducive to catching up. Shushan read aloud the plaque hanging on the mansion's gate. "Shu Residence." "Shu," Uncle Chen said. "Could this be the residence of the benevolent Lord Shu?" "The benevolent Lord Shu? Who's that?" Shushan asked. "In one village, most families share the surname Wen," Uncle Chen explained. "Fewer than 10 households moved in later, and among them was a merchant named Shu. It's said that he used to be a cloth merchant who owned his own fabric shop. Over the decades, he amassed quite a fortune. He later sold his shop after some family misfortune and moved his wife and children to one village, his wife's hometown. He's been living here for about 15 or 16 years. He's a kind-hearted man, and with his wealth, he's helped many in the village, earning him the nickname the Benevolent Lord Shu." Hearing this, Shushan halted before he could rudely slam the door open. Instead, he flicked his sleeve, summoning a gust of wind that slipped through the rusted door hinges and gently pushed the withered gate open. The wooden door creaked with an ancient groaning sound, and from the eastern room came a series of startled gasps. The open gate revealed a figure in the hall who had been about to push open the door to the eastern room. He froze and raised a hand to shield his eyes, seeming unable to bear even the faintest sliver of daylight streaming in from outside. The light was too dim to clearly illuminate the man's features and only outlined his profile. His shoulders were no longer straight, suggesting he was an advanced age, probably his 50s. Hey now. He was of average height, and his knees seemed unsteady and slightly bent, as if his legs weren't quite up to the task. It took him a moment to adjust to the light. He lowered his hand, still hidden in the shadows. "Why are you guests standing at my door? Is there something you need?" he asked. "Today is my birthday, and all who come are welcome. If you don't mind, please come in and have a drink." The group was momentarily stunned. This really was the benevolent Lord Shu. Before they could respond, he added, "I have some old friends who have traveled from afar to celebrate with me. They are one of the most famous opera troupes from Ching, known for their precise rhythms and captivating performances. You should stay a while and enjoy the show. Every time they come, Wen Village lights up and everyone loves it." "An opera troupe?" Shushan and Xuanmin exchanged glances, both recalling the group they had encountered on the road. However, before they could dwell on it further, the scene before them began to change. Lord Shu's words seemed to have opened some invisible door. The dilapidated Shu residence suddenly lit up with red lanterns, and the entire deserted village came alive with the sound of people. Hundreds of shadowy figures emerged from the thick fog, moving toward them, their forms indistinct and nigh endless. At the same time, from the end of the mountain path not far away, the sound of approaching hoofbeats grew loud. The group turned and saw a caravan gradually take shape in the morning mist, traveling along the village road in front of Wen Village's stele. Their three carriages led the way, followed by a donkey cart, with only the lead carriage having a driver. The man driving was tall and burly, with three prominent scars on his face that gave him a fierce, unkind appearance. However, Jiang Xining and the others knew that this man's intimidating looks truly his concealed his true nature. He was actually quite warm-hearted. If he was if he'd still been alive, he would undoubtedly have been considered a good man. Why couldn't he be considered a good man even if he's dead? Like, he could be considered a good ghost. They were none other than the scar-faced man and his group who had briefly given Shushian and the others a ride at Guan Yin Crossing. "They're still here?" Jiang Xining muttered in surprise. As a genuine wandering ghost, Jiang Xining knew all too well how much spirits feared the collision of yin energy and yang energy. Few ghosts or lofty spirits would choose to roam about in broad daylight. Even Jiang Xining, who had a paper body for protection and the support of Shushian and Xuanmin, only dared to move around on cloudy days or during dawn and dusk. Yet this long-deceased opera troupe showed no such caution, because they didn't know they were dead. They lacked any sense of vigilance or self-awareness. It was unclear how many streets crowded with living people they had passed through on their journey. For ordinary ghosts, such exposure would have long caused them to disintegrate and vanish due to the effects of or yang energy. Somehow, they had arrived here completely unscathed. "You think they're just like you?" Shushian glanced at the bookworm. "I only said they were already dead, but I never said they were your kind, did I?" Jiang Xining looked puzzled. "They're not?" "If I told you that you're dead 800 times, would you disappear?" Shushian snapped. "You may not have said it 800 times, but you've definitely said it 80, Jiang Xining replied woodenly. "And yet you're still bouncing around quite happily, aren't you?" Jiang Xining was still confused. "If they're not ghosts, then What are they? They're attachments. Oh, they are attachments, Schwanman interjected. What are attachments? Jiang Xining had never heard of such a thing. Attachments were neither ghosts nor resentful spirits. They were more like memories, born from unfulfilled promises or deep seated obsessions that lingered even in death, overshadowing all else. They were so consumed by their attachments that they didn't realize they were dead. They remembered only that they had promises to keep or appointments to fulfill. It's like owning a mountain of debt, dying before you can repay it, and automatically trying anyway, Shushian said lazily. Meanwhile, you're fixated on the idea that you can't disappear yet, at least not until you repay the debt or have settled it completely. You continue to exist, regardless of what you know. Understand? What happens to them if the attachment is resolved? Then it's time to move on. Putting aside the status of the opera troupe, they were awkwardly caught between a rock and a hard place in their current situation. Both paths are blocked. What about my sister? Jiang Xining said. How do we get out of here? Who said anything about leaving? We're not leaving? Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen shook like leaves as they stared at the villagers approaching the Shu residence. Were they supposed to stay and become someone's dinner? Some invitations can't be refused, Shushian said, wagging a finger. These things wandering around the deserted village have their limits. As long as they stay within their boundaries, they're normal. But once they step out of those boundaries, things get complicated. Think about it. If a friendly person invites you to their home for a drink and you refuse, what happens? At best, you'd have to explain yourself over and over. At worst, there might be some physical coercion involved. Among the living, this wasn't so big a deal. Someone would eventually give in. Not so with the dead. What if they got impatient while tugging at their guests? What if they accidentally stepped out of their boundaries in the struggle? There were too many variables to consider. However, Shushian had other reasons not to leave immediately. If he really wanted out, not even the heavens could stop him. He didn't mind staying a little longer because he sensed something unusual about this place. Perhaps he could find another piece of dragon bone here. While the group stood around talking, the scar-faced man had already pulled on the reins and stopped the carriage. He jumped down and, upon seeing Shushian and the others, had a moment of shock. He clasped his hands and walked over, frowning slightly. What are you doing here? If ordinary people ran into acquaintances on the road, they might find it quite coincidental, express surprise, and exchange a few pleasantries. They would offer some polite greetings, at least. But the scar-faced man didn't follow convention. As he looked at Shushian's group, his gaze carried a hint of reproach. There were no polite words, and he even seemed somewhat displeased. A far cry from the warm-hearted man they had traveled with earlier. Not far away, a group of men and women, old and young, began disembarking from the three carriages. Some were unloading equipment from the donkey cart, while others walked toward the scar-faced man. An elderly woman among them glanced at the Shu residents and back at Shushian's group. It's freezing out here. Why are you lingering? You should hurry back to the county town. She was familiar to Shushian and the others. During their journey together, she had given Shi Tuzhang a hand warmer. By all accounts, she was a warm and gentle soul, so why was she, like the scar-faced man, urging them to leave? Jiang Xining, sensing he was being suddenly driven from the first time, stood there like a rod, unsure of what to do. Ah, Ren Liang, they are my guests today. Come, let us tie up the horses and go inside for a warm drink to soothe their throats, Lord Shu said cheerfully, waving to the opera troupe members who had disembarked from the carriages. Everyone, come in. With those words, he reached out to pull Shushan inside. Ah, my back is stiff from sitting too long. Shushan grabbed Xuanmin, who was close to him, and used his shoulder for support. As he stretched, conveniently avoiding Lord Shu's hand. His moves seemed entirely natural, almost seamless. Lord Shu didn't seem to mind. He switched targets and grabbed the nearest person. Jiang Xining blinked. Talk about bad luck. Alright, we're at 22 for his suffering. This was the first time he'd been grabbed by another ghost. The benevolent Lord Shu's hand was as cold as any ghost's, the kind of chill that could pierce a living person to the bone. For Jiang Xining, it felt like nothing. What should I call you, young man? I should have prepared some hand warmers. My hands are too cold. I hope I didn't startle you, Lord Shu said, benevolently. Jiang Xining forced a smile. Likewise. Who knows which of us is older? He was reluctantly dragged into the Shu residence by Lord Shu. Once inside, he had an idea. Shu Lao Yi, why don't you go attend to your other guests? I can manage on my own. His eyes flicked toward the closed door of the eastern room while he spoke. Oh, my apologies, Lord Shu said with regret. There are so many guests here today. Please forgive me if I have been neglectful. I'll go greet the neighbors outside. Feel free to look around. Xuanmin and the others came in as they spoke. Lord Shu paused when he saw Shu Xian. Young man, are you unwell? Shu Xian patted his legs. Leg problems. Hard to move around. The benevolent Lord Shu slapped his forehead. What a coincidence! I happen to have a two-wheeled chair at home. My elderly mother once had trouble walking, so I had someone make one for her. It's been sitting in a corner unused. Since it's just gathering dust, why don't you use it? Carrying you around must be tiring. Oh, it's not tiring, Shu Xian said politely. Xuanmin, the one actually doing the heavy lifting, stayed conspicuously silent. Woo. Lord Shu was not just paying lip service. A man of his word, he really did have someone bring the two-wheeled chair from a side room on the main hall. From a side room to the main hall. Shu Xian noticed that the Shu residence had entirely flat thresholds between areas, likely built that way to accommodate Lord Shu's mother, who had used the chair. The small detail made Shu Xian think that the benevolent Lord Shu's name and reputation were well deserved. Though called a chair, the two-wheeled chair was essentially a thin backrest and seat with wooden wheels on either side and two handles at the back so servants could push it. Lord Shu had someone clean the chair, and even thoughtfully found a cushion to place on the seat. Shushan thanked him, though when he saw the pillow, he said, No need to trouble yourself. I'm not that picky. I love how he's just lying through his teeth right now. Like, it's no trouble. We always have such cushions on hand. The chair is too hard, and sitting on it for long would be uncomfortable. Besides, the weather is cold and damp. It wouldn't do to catch a chill. However, Shu Xian had already unceremoniously taken a seat and was ordering Xuanmin to push him around. All right. You're quite an interesting young man, Lord Shu said with a laugh. He clasped his hands in parting and went out to greet his neighbors. Once Lord Shu's figure disappeared around the corner, Shu Xian didn't wait another second to shove open the door to the eastern room. And yeah, Shu Xian lies with a straight face. Yes, he does. Yeah. Inside, the beggars were huddled around an almost dry clay pot. They had been frightened by the laughter outside, which they had mistaken for some kind of ghostly gathering. I mean, they're not wrong. When Shu Xian suddenly pushed the door open and rolled in, the beggars were scared out of their wits. The two most timid among them fainted on the spot with a thud. Well, that's quite the welcome, Shu Xian said, completely unrepentant, even teasing them. Sensing that Shu Xian might scare the entire room into fainting, Xuan Min promptly maneuvered him into a corner of the room. The monk then drew a circle around him, pulled out a paper talisman, and slapped it onto the evil spirit's forehead. Shu Xian was flummoxed. What? Are we dealing with zombies now? Hey, bald donkey, why are you so petty? I just touched your head. It's not like I teased you or anything. Was that really necessary? 64. Or is it 3? 63. My bad. 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. Yeah, 64. 63. 63. There we go. Sorry, I drew one of the tallies really close to the other. He rolled his eyes from the position he was stuck in, facing the wall. He was about to say more when he felt something cold in his hand. He watched Xuan Min place the string of copper coins in his palm. This is the most spiritually rich spot in the deserted village. Focus on nourishing your bones. With that, Xuan Min patted the back of Shu Xian's head and walked away. Shu Xian stared at the copper coins in his hand, momentarily stunned. Where are you even going? Shu Xian wanted to turn to see, but the talisman on his forehead kept him from moving his neck. The two masters' self-absorbed actions left the room full of the beggars at a loss. Even Jiang Xining and Shi Jing and Feng Chang didn't have a clue what they had just witnessed. As they stood in a daze, Uncle Chen and Aunt Chen sneaked into the room, followed closely by Xing Zi, who rushed over to Jiang Jing as soon as she saw her. Young mistress! Seeing that the two were unharmed, aside from being a bit disheveled, Uncle Chen exclaimed, Young master, young mistress, you scared me half to death. He glared at the beggars and hurried to shield Feng Chang and his wife. Yue and Xing Zi were crying the whole way. Jiang Jing gently reassured them that they were all right, while Xing Zi untied the couple's bindings. The beggars, who hadn't really intended to harm them and were now scared out of their wits, didn't lift a finger to stop her. The couple soon removed the ropes and stretched their limbs. Xingzi tossed the ropes aside. Thank goodness that you're safe. It wasn't just me and Aunt Chen. Even little Jiang Xiaoyi's eyes were red earlier. He was clearly worried sick. Young Master Jiang? Jiang Shijing froze, looking as if she had seen a ghost. She grabbed Xingzi. What did you say? Little Jiang Xiaoyi? Which Jiang Xiaoyi? Before Xingzi could answer, a gentle, nasal voice spoke up. Gee, it's me. Jiang Jing fell silent. Her fingers on Xingzi's arm wavered. Hearing that word was enough to bring tears to her eyes, blurring her vision. For a moment, she was so lost she couldn't process why her vision had suddenly grown so blurry. She blinked hard, her eyes darting without settling. Huning? Is that you, Huning? Jiang Shijing's eyes welled up as she repeated her brother's nickname, and 2 large tears rolled down her cheeks. You're not hiding, are you? I can't see you." Before her vision could clear, fresh tears welled up in her eyes. I was af- I was afraid that standing in front of you would directly startle you," Jiang Shining said softly. He had trailed behind the group into the room and was now standing in an inconspicuous corner, partially hidden by a bedpost. Yeah, I agree. Poor Jiang's siblings. Jiang Shijing's tears cascaded down her face. "How would you?" She had barely spoken a few words before a heavy sob escaped her. "How would you ever startle me? No matter what you look like, you could never startle me. Your sister isn't afraid. Come out. Don't hide." Before she could finish speaking, she felt someone pull her into an embrace. The person holding her was thin and frail, his embrace not as broad or sturdy as she remembered. Nevertheless, it was familiar. The same embrace she had known since childhood. Whenever she'd been wronged or suffered, her brother, 3 years her junior, would come to comfort her. He would tell her amusing stories from books or recount his own embarrassing mishaps until she couldn't help laughing. From a small child who could only cling to her arm, he had grown taller than her, tall enough to envelop her completely in a hug. Yet Jiang Xining's embrace was now devoid of warmth and chilled her to the core. He had held her on instinct, but he still remembered that he no longer had the body heat of a living person when he felt her shiver. And this freezing weather, holding her would only make her colder. Embarrassed, he let go and took a step back. "Why are you so cold?" Jing sobbed, refusing to let him move too far away. She rubbed his hands between hers, blowing on them to warm them up. No matter how long she held them, they remained icy. Her tears fell even faster. Jiang Xining blinked up at the ceiling, taking a moment to compose himself before looking back at her. "Ji, don't bother. I'm not cold." Jiang Shijing's tears seemed endless, falling in large drops onto Jiang Xining's hands. She continued to rub at him, her fingers unsteady as she tried to wipe away the tears, only to find that they had soaked into his skin. In moments of intense emotion, people often lose control of their strength. Jiang Xining's hands, already damp from his sister's tears, were somewhat fragile. Her vigorous rubbing caused the skin around his fingers to fray. Still, he didn't want to pull his hand away too soon. His sister deserved to release the pent-up emotions she had been holding back for years. It would be worth it, even if it meant losing a few fingers. I mean, that would also probably traumatize your sister, so maybe not. Like, I get it, but yeah. Then again, if his fingers really did fall off, that might frighten her. Reluctantly, he blinked away the moisture in his eyes and looked at Fang Cheng. "Jifu, she's crying enough to wash my robes. Can you stop her?" So, Jifu is a term of address for one's brother-in-law, specifically the husband of one's older sister. Feng Cheng was also startled when saw Jiang Xining. This was followed by a flood of emotions. He hadn't watched Jiang Xining grow up like his wife had, but in his childhood, he had looked after her little brother a few times. As teenagers, he and Jiang Xining had gone into the mountains to gather herbs together. When he married Jiang Shijing, it was Jiang Xining who had carried his Ying to the bridal sedan. Never had he imagined that their next meeting would be separated by life and death. He understood his wife's feelings all too well, so he had been standing quietly to the side, not interrupting. Only when Jiang Xining spoke to him did he nod with red-rimmed eyes and pull Jiang Shijing into his arms. Aww. Alright, we're almost done, but we have one more picture. We've been very blessed this time. Got a picture per chapter. They're so cute. And it hurts. No, you're right. Definitely specific of this is my oldest sister's husband. So my brother-in-law for my oldest sister. Yeah, from laughing to crying. If you keep crying like this, he won't be able to talk, he said gently. That's right, G. I was only able to come here and see you because of the help of some kind people, Jiang Xining said. What if her insistent crying hurt her eyes? He exchanged a meaningful glance with Fang Cheng and quickly changed the subject. It was just like when they were teenagers, working together to cheer up Jiang Jing. Kind people. Feng Cheng held his wife and rocked her back and forth, comforting her. Ah Ning, where are these kind people? Your sister and I should thank them properly. Yeah, the little kid version and the adult version. Such precious babies. I love how this artist draws the chibis. They're so cute. Ah Ning, where are these kind people? Your sister and I should thank them properly. Having listened to the entire tearful reunion from his corner, Shu Xian let out a dry laugh. No need for thanks. Just do me a favor and remove this damn talisman. Jiang Xining had almost forgotten that a certain kind person was being punished with a timeout in the corner. Feng Cheng and Jiang Shijing looked at Shushan in bewilderment, then at Jiang Xining. What did you do to upset the master this time? Jiang Xining said with a sigh as he walked over. If I remove the talisman, will I be implicated? Shushan, still scowling at the wall, snorted. I don't know how that bald donkey will treat you if you remove it, but if you just stand there watching and do nothing, I guarantee you'll regret it for the rest of your life, or afterlife, while clinging to my leg. 64. This was the first time Jiang Shijing and Feng Cheng had encountered a kind person with such a unique personality. Well, if that's the case, then I definitely won't remove it. After all, since once it's gone, you'll be free to move, Jiang Xining said flatly. Bookworm, are you rebelling now, of all times? Joking aside, Jiang Xining was soft-hearted and couldn't really stand by and do nothing. He got his fill of the sight of the wise one being forced to behave, then reached out and grabbed the talisman on Shushan's forehead. However, in his carelessness, he had used the hand that had been soaked by Jiang Shijing's tears. And Shuamin's talismans were no ordinary talismans. They weren't easily removed. I'd have to check, but I think that the same artist illustrates 300 years of longing and they draw kids very well. Oh, cool. However, in his carelessness, he used the hand that had been soaked by Jiang Shijing's tears. And Xuanmin's talismans were no ordinary talismans. They weren't easily removed. So, as Jiang Xining gripped the talisman and pulled downward, his damp hand tore right off. Shushan stared. Jiang Xining stared. Neither of them moved. Ah Ning, why are you standing there motionless? Jiang Shijing asked. Jiang Xining immediately stiffened and forced his pained expression off his face. He turned around with a strained smile, hiding the broken hand behind his back. It's nothing, I just... Before he could finish his sentence, the door to the eastern room slammed open with a large, unceremonious bang! And that is where we're going to end it for tonight. Though we will definitely find out just who is barging in on Thursday. Okay, we made it! Oh my gosh, it's been 3 hours. No wonder I'm tired. But anyway, thank you all so much for sticking with me and for listening. There was some interesting stuff in this one. Some, definitely some surprises, but no. Um, I look forward to seeing what happens next. All right. Thank you so much for everyone that stayed and listened tonight. It's always a lovely time. Thank you so much for everyone that listens later. I hope you enjoy. I'll see you guys Thursday. Good night.